Chapter 524. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. When Hun stood beside Su Li, and the gray saber appeared in his hand out of thin air. He stared at He Jiu coldly. He Jiu's face was rigid, like a robot that was suddenly stuck. Then, his eyeballs rolled crazily inside his eye sockets like marbles. His entire face began to shake, and pieces of human skin were shaken off like powder, revealing the layers of rotten flesh underneath. Ew, it was the first time for Hun to see such a disgusting ghost. He couldn't help but retch and almost spit out the breakfast. But at this moment, he heard the clear voice of his junior sister apprentice, senior fellow apprentice, step back. He took a step back subconsciously, and immediately saw a barbed hook and sickle passing the tip of his nose. He was so scared that he broke into a cold sweat. If he didn't step back, half of his face would be cut off just now. But before he recovered from the shock, the rotten flesh suddenly swelled rapidly, burst his clothes, and turned into a mass of white flesh. In the middle of the flesh there was a huge mouth full of sharp teeth, which was opening and closing constantly. Tut 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 tut. You spoil my plan. I will swallow you. The flesh laughed wildly and crushed to Su Li and Hun. Hun's face changed dramatically, and he was about to step back. But a strong thought came from his feet and impacted his awareness. See. Hun's pale face suddenly turned pale. The severe pain made him even unable to think, and instinctively covered his head. No, no. Drive it away. Don't let it in. Otherwise, I will die and you will all. The roar stopped abruptly, and the pain receded like a tide. When Hun put down his hands, like a drowning person being lifted out of the water. He gasped violently, trying to relieve the tinnitus caused by the impact just now. He tried to open his eyes wide, and the blurred scene in front of him gradually became clear. He saw a pair of ink-black pupils, which were shedding bloody tears, occupied his whole sight. Hun was so scared that his heart stopped suddenly. He swung the gray saber to chop, but was caught by a small hand. Well, don't scare him. He is more precious than you. Su Li's voice came. The small hand suddenly shrank, stepped back for 2 steps, and bowed to Hun carefully. Hun saw it clearly. It turned out to be a little girl who was younger than his junior sister apprentice. But the bloody tears in her eyes. Ghost? An obedient ghost? He was shocked, and everything that happened just now flashed in his mind quickly. Then his sight couldn't help but pass Hong Baizhu and fall on Su Li. She still had that delicate and pretty face and that frail and delicate body. But now, the pitifully weak junior sister, he knew, had actually stepped on that huge mountain of flesh ghost and turned it into a thin sheet of paper. Was there really something wrong with the people from an sect? Hun bit his lips tightly. He only felt bitterness in his mouth and resentment in his heart, but couldn't tell anyone. He trusted someone so unreservedly, but it was actually a lie. Senior brother, now is not the time to be distracted. Since there is something in the deep mountains pretending to be master, that means Hun was shocked. As expected, he had no time to think about Su Li's identity. He held his forehead and walked to Su Li, and asked uncomfortably, Su Yu, what did you ask? Hearing the change of Hun's address, Su Li raised her eyebrows and then chuckled. I haven't been in this sect for a long time. I don't understand what he said. Senior brother apprentice, you can interrogate. You don't call me senior brother. A trace of anger appeared on Hun's pale face, and there was a childish grievance that couldn't be seen. Su Li couldn't help laughing. Although she couldn't empathize with Hun's emotions with her state of mind, she still apologized with understanding. Sorry, I concealed my identity, but I only concealed a name. The name is fake, but my heart is real. Do you care about me or my name? Hun couldn't find the words to refute for a while. He felt that Su Li's words were a little weird, but after thinking carefully, he found it reasonable. What did he care about? Was it just a name? As the little junior sister apprentice said, in the past more than a month, she had never been hypocritical to him. Even today, thanks to the help of the junior sister apprentice, he was saved from being killed by the ghost. Forget it. I'm in the erosion period, and I won't live long. Don't worry about it. Thinking of this, he felt unwilling. But in the face of business, he managed to put away his emotions, took out a red jade token from his arms, and put it on the rotten meat. With a bang, the red jade token burned spontaneously, and a small area of rotten meat was scorched. The meat immediately struggled violently. When Hun's heart sank and he said, "It's really a ghost in the deep mountain. If it's a ghost in the book pavilion, it won't ignite the yang token. So what should we do now?" Suli blinked, and asked for Wen Hun's opinion. Wen Hun hesitated for a moment and said, "I don't know what is in the deep mountain. If we can get the confession of this ghost, we may get something. It's easy." Suli lifted her foot, reached out, and grabbed the rotten meat on the ground into a ball. Then she threw it to the little ghost, Hong Baiju. The little girl caught it with some disgust. But in order to prove her value, she still tried to investigate the rotten meat. Then she said in a ghost's unique voice, 10 minutes, unlock the memory. Then you stay here." Suli set a bounded domain of ghost for the little girl, and then walked into the hall with Wen Hun. "Where are we going?" Wen Hun looked back at the little girl with bloody tears who was concentrating on cracking the memory, and couldn't help asking. Suli smiled sweetly. Senior fellow apprentice was bullied by a bad guy just now. "How can I forget it?" As she said, she stopped smiling and stamped her feet gently. The ripples spread, and her soft voice instantly became cold. "Come out." The shadow penetrated into the ground, and turned into a sharp sword to cut off dozens of black meridians in an instant. The pure black gas gushing out from the broken meridians was absorbed by the evil ghost. The shadow in the deepest part was angry at once, and controlled the nearby black meridians to entangle the evil ghost. The hall shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. Wen Hun was horrified. He wanted to take Suli away, but found that he couldn't move Suli at all, and the ground around Suli didn't shake at all. This fluctuation. Is it possible that junior sister apprentice and the immortal ghost underground fight? Wen Hun thought of what Suli said just now, and was immediately stunned by his guess. At this moment, boom! Several holes were broken on the slate in the center of the hall, and dozens of black meridians shot out like tentacles. They paused in the air for a moment, and then turned into sharp swords uniformly, stabbing towards Suli like lightning. "Junior sister apprentice, be careful." The speed of the meridians was so fast that Wen Hun had no time to block them. At the moment when he spoke, those meridians had already arrived in front of Suli. "Do you think I am the weakness?" Suli narrowed her eyes and stretched out her right hand calmly. The golden electric arc twined and flickered, and the power in her palm was released lightly. Swashing. A golden light as thick as a bucket burst out. Boom! Patter! Wen Hun's legs went soft and he fell to the ground. He stared at the hall without roof and walls in shock. There was no trace of those meridians in front of him. The ground of the hall seemed to be plowed by someone. Except for the rolled soil, there was nothing left. Junior sister apprentice. What was her cultivation? Senior fellow apprentice. I accidentally damaged the master's hall. Suli brushed her hair behind her ears in embarrassment, and her face was slightly red. Wen Hun came to his sense. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say for a moment. "I don't want to, either." Suli shook her head and sighed. "It's just that I have eaten too much recently. Even I don't know what realm my strength has reached, so I can't control it properly." Wen Hun was silent for a moment. When he was about to say something, he suddenly saw Suli look slightly serious. She looked behind him and said calmly, "Senior fellow apprentice, come to me." Wen Hun felt a chill in his heart. He rushed to Suli without saying a word, and then he dared to look back. It was unknown when a black meridian as thick as a bucket sprang out of the broken ground and turned into an indistinct twisted shadow. The shadow was colorful, almost containing all the colors in the world, but most of them were dirty gray at first glance. "Your Excellency is the Emperor in the human world." The familiar ghost voice sounded, but there was a strong fear in it. "You and I mind our own business. Why do you destroy my small temple?" "Ho ho!" Su Li chuckled softly and said indifferently, "Who are you? Tell me your name." Wen Hun was a little confused. The ghost called the junior sister apprentice Emperor. What did that mean? The master was just in Huashan realm. Above Huashan realm was nature's test, which had nothing to do with the word emperor. The twisted shadow didn't seem to hear the derogatory meaning in Su Li's words, and then responded, "I am a remnant of an ancient ghost, and the ghost emperor gave me the name Hong. Emperor of human clan, you are a rare overmatch of human clan. Why do you offend the ghost emperor for a gathering place?" "Ghost emperor?" Su Li tilted her head and smiled. "So, you live in the all-spirits era? I heard that the ghost emperor only lives in the all-spirits era." When the twisted shadow heard this, a cold sweat came down instantly. If it had a cold sweat. Speaking of the ghost emperor, it's a coincidence. Su Li pointed outside the door. That little girl is called Hong Baizhu. Since you know the ghost emperor, do you know her? The twisted shadow trembled, and seemed to disperse. The atmosphere was stagnant at this moment. When Hun glanced at Su Li, and then looked up at the immortal of Ghost, regarded as the master by the master, he couldn't help but scratch his head. What did the junior sister apprentice say to the immortal of Ghost? He didn't understand a word, but it seemed that the junior sister apprentice had the upper hand. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the hall. It was the little girl who pinched a bit of minced meat in her hand, and said with joy in her chaotic voice, It's out." When the twisted shadow saw the bloody tears in the little girl's eyes, it suddenly collapsed. It was really the legendary Hong Baizhu. The little girl held the minced meat and was a little confused, but she still walked to Su Li, and reached out to point between Su Li's eyebrows. "That memory, pass to..." Puff! With a sudden sound in the hall, the collapsed shadow reappeared. Chapter 525. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. After the smoke dissipated, the distorted shadow was gone. Instead, it was replaced by a little black pig. It was just an ordinary little black pig, which was no different from the black pigs raised by farmers. When Wen Hun saw the thing on the ground, he felt a surge of blood and dizziness. He felt that he had been humiliated after practicing for hundreds of years. This is the immortal of Ghost worshipped by the master? The little black pig on the ground stuck up its butt, walked slowly to Hong Baizhu, and knelt down like a human. "Your Highness," before it finished speaking, it saw the little girl hiding behind Su Li in fear. Although she was also afraid of Su Li, at least Su Li would not eat her for the time being. And this black pig was the same kind as her. Since they were the same kind, they would eat each other. "This little girl doesn't remember you." Su Li reached out and took the little girl in her arms. Her tone was smooth but indisputable. "You don't have to salute. Both the immortal cultivation sect and you seem to be in a bad situation. I have nothing to do, so I am willing to help you. Now I ask and you answer. Do you hear me?" The little black pig nodded hurriedly. It couldn't be better that the emperor of the human clan in front of it was willing to help. As for the consequences, it would not be worse than being swallowed by the thing in the Een mountain. "Very well. Now I ask you, what is hidden in the deep mountain? Where did He Zhou go?" Seeing Wen Hun beside Su Li, the little black pig didn't dare to lie. "Since the Lihan tablet was set up, Qing Shui's circle has been changed. It is no longer suitable for us to live. I have consumed too much energy and am about to die. Fortunately, Insi of the Een Mountain transmitted the sound and was willing to help me with flesh and blood. But Insi was sealed in the depths of the Een Mountain, and there was a tactical matrix set by the human clan outside the Een Mountain. I couldn't get in. In desperation, I could only make an agreement with the Immortal Cultivation sect. They entered the mountain to help me get flesh and blood, and I gave them a little flesh and blood. But Hijio must keep the secret and not let others find out my existence. Otherwise, I would be attacked by the human clan, and this sect would also be destroyed. Hijio promised me and kept his promise to keep a low profile. The Immortal Cultivation sect and I depended on each other. At first, we lived in harmony, but later, the little black pig's eyes darkened. It's true that humans eat the flesh and blood of Insi to improve their souls, but, after all, humans and ghosts are different. After the excess of Insi's flesh and blood, many disciples of the Immortal Cultivation sect died suddenly, and new ghosts that can adapt to Qin Shui Circle were born. Speaking of this, Su Li already had a guess in her heart, but she still didn't say anything and continued to listen to the little black pig. The newborn ghost was ferocious and forbearing. He possessed Hijio's first disciple and sneaked into Een Mountain, intending to devour Insi. However, Insi was not easy to deal with. Even in a weak state, he sealed him with one hand. Every 100 years, Hijio would enter the mountain to perform a ritual to strengthen the seal. The new ghost hates me, Insi, and the sect. Every time the seal is consolidated, there will be some trouble in the sect, but it has never been more fierce than this time. I recognize the rotten flesh. It is the ability of the new ghost. If I am integrated with it, I will be delirious and do irreversible things. The little black pig trembled, and fear flashed in its eyes. If you didn't happen to come to this sect, I am afraid that not only the Immortal Cultivation sect but also the entire Jojo region will suffer a catastrophe. Su Li waved her hand and looked indifferent. She said, "How did the ghost in the book pavilion appear? You said that you made an agreement with Hijio. Hijio is only more than 3,000 years old. There are even ghosts 4,000 or 5,000 years old in the book pavilion. Don't tell me that they are also born by the disciples of the Immortal Cultivation sect?" The little black pig originally wanted to deceive her, but it didn't expect that Su Li even knew the age of the ghosts in the book pavilion. It shook its head and told the truth. Of course not. The book pavilion is not a book pavilion, but built by imitating the Tsangyin Tower in ancient times. The ghosts hiding in it will not be affected by Qin Shui Circle. There are also many precious scripts that only ghosts can practice in it. It was not open to the disciples of the Immortal Cultivation sect, but somehow it was opened later. Is that so? Su Li nodded gently and light flashed in her eyes. Why don't you hide in it? Why do you have to suffer underground? The little black pig's eyes flashed, and it looked bitter. It's not that I don't want to, but that my body is too big, and the fake Tsangyin Tower can't accommodate me at all. Su Li nodded and accepted the answer. She was silent for a moment and asked aloud, "If I want to save the Immortal Cultivation sect, what should I do?" "Your Excellency, you are righteous." The little black pig was excited, and bent its 2 forelegs as if it was kneeling. If the ghosts in the Een Mountain can be destroyed, everything can be solved. "Your Excellency, please help the Immortal Cultivation sect through the difficulties." Phew! Wen Hun breathed a sigh of relief. Hearing this, he finally understood the essence of the Immortal Cultivation sect, and couldn't help but look at Su Li hopefully. Su Li looked back and smiled at him. Then she turned around and her face became indifferent again. "Don't worry. I won't leave it alone even for the sake of my senior fellow apprentice. You go back and have a rest first. I will go to the Een Mountain in a few days." "Thank you, Your Excellency." The little black pig achieved its goal, so it didn't stay any longer. In the blink of an eye, its figure disappeared and returned to the depths of the ground. "Senior fellow apprentice, the new ghost wants to invade again, and it won't be so fast. This hall doesn't need to be protected for the time being. Let's go back to rest first, and then go to the Mountain tomorrow. When Hun nodded, looked around, and couldn't help sighing when he saw the Hall of the Lord was almost destroyed. Then he stepped away. After going down the main peak, when Hun went to appease the disciples of the sect. After all, the movement on the main peak was not small, which had attracted many people to stop and watch. Suli returned to her residence, stood in front of her yard, and looked at the deep mountain from afar. Little Suli, are you really going to the Mountain to kill the ghosts tomorrow? Black Lotus couldn't help but rush out and asked with a strange look. In his impression, Suli was not a warm-hearted person. What, protect the immortal cultivation sect for senior fellow apprentice? What a lie. No, that black and swarthy little piglet was a ghost, wasn't it? I must go to the Mountain. Suli chuckled. As for whether to kill the new ghost or not, she didn't say anything. Black Lotus rolled his eyes, and knew that this girl was black-hearted. She probably didn't believe a word of the little pig's words. She just wanted a legitimate chance to enter the Mountain. The next morning, at the foot of the Mountain, many disciples of the immortal cultivation sect were ready for battle. They knew some inside information more or less. Although they were ordinary disciples on the surface, they were deeply trusted by the Lord. After a while, when Hun and Suli came together, the leading middle-aged practitioner greeted them, and said with worry, "First senior fellow apprentice, you must be careful this time. Even if you can't find the Lord, you must come back before dark." Everyone knew that after dark, there were all kinds of horrors in the Mountain. Even if when Hun had a special physique, he might not be able to bear it, unless he found Heeju before dark. When Hun nodded. Seeing this, the middle-aged practitioner glanced at Suli, who had just joined the sect for a short time. Although he felt strange, he didn't ask much. After all, with all kinds of horrors in the sect, curious people had died long ago. All the disciples took action. The tactical matrix of extreme yang did little harm to people, but it was not without harm. For the existence of half-human and half-ghost like one Hun, it must be opened before he could enter. Otherwise, he would be almost burned by the tactical matrix before he entered the Mountain. 8 gates of extreme yang open. The middle-aged cultivator shouted and waved his hands in an incantation gesture. A beam of white light shot into the spell formation, causing ripples to appear on the transparent barrier. Then, the barrier opened up from the center and turned into a small door that could allow a person to enter. When Hun didn't hesitate to pull Suli into it. Swish! The small door was closed again. The middle-aged practitioner was sweating profusely. He sat on the ground and gasped. A strange smile appeared on his face, but it disappeared in an instant. Others were busy resting, so they didn't see it. Puff! The gray blade instantly cut a wolf-like ghost into 2 parts, and it turned into black smoke and dissipated. It should be just a newly formed ghost. When Hun took back the blade and breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as he landed, he saw a sharp mouth full of fangs. Frightened, he pulled out the blade and cut it without saying a word. Unexpectedly, the little ghost was killed by 1 cut. He had never killed a ghost, which showed how weak this wolf was. However, Master once said that although there were many ghosts in the Mountain, it was extremely difficult to meet them. Why did we meet them as soon as we came in? He frowned and looked at Suli beside him. The shadow behind Suli, who was eating, immediately disappeared. She smiled. If you want to know the answer, let's walk more. Okay. When Hun nodded. Suddenly, his face became entangled again. After following Suli for a short distance, he finally couldn't help asking, what should I call you? Although he didn't know the true meaning of Emperor of the Human Race, he could guess that it was a realm that he would never be able to reach in his lifetime. Otherwise, how could a terrifying ghost that had lived for thousands or tens of thousands of years reveal its true form, speak nicely, and even have a hint of humility in it? Even if she didn't care about such a person, It was difficult for him to call her junior sister apprentice. Hearing this, Suli smiled sweetly and said softly, "Since you feel uncomfortable, I won't force you. Call me sister apprentice or master." When Hun was shocked and blurted out, "Master? You are the grand elder of an I sect. Why, am I famous?" Suli looked back and blinked. When Hun scratched his head, "I heard from Master that you are extremely mysterious and vicious. With you, an I sect is likely to be more difficult to deal with than the other 25 sections. If you meet them, you should be careful." Speaking of this, when Hun's face turned red, he scratched his head and said firmly, "Master must be wrong. Sister, you disregard your own safety and go into the mountain to kill ghosts. You are obviously extremely benevolent and righteous. How can you be vicious?" Hearing this, Black Lotus rolled his eyes. The silly boy was grateful for Suli's kindness of going into the mountain to kill ghosts, but he ignored a big problem. The grand elder of a sect disguised her identity and sneaked into another sect. How could her motive be small? Suli smiled happily and even said with a hint of relief, "It's great that you can think so." Chapter 526. 34 Chinese Net. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. The road in the Een Mountain was not complicated. There was only a regular and spacious mountain road leading to the bottom, far into the black dense forest. It was dark and indistinct. Why is the terrain completely different from what is recorded on the map? When Hun put down the scroll in his hand and looked a little confused. Although the map was drawn hundreds of years ago, it was not impossible to find a trace of similarity, right? Did the junior fellow apprentices make a mistake when opening the tactical matrix? This is not the entrance of the Een Mountain. When Hun said in shock, and immediately looked for the pattern similar to the road in front of him on the map. Suli smiled indifferently and said, "The Een Mountain is not big. Even if it is sent to the wrong place, we can find it." When Hun was stunned, thinking of the horrible strength that Suli broke out yesterday, he suddenly felt it was very reasonable. Even the immortal of ghosts was not her opponent, so the little ghosts and monsters in the Een Mountain were nothing. When he was about to speak, he suddenly saw Suli turn her head and stare at his side. When Hun's scalp was numb, he moved a few steps away and looked over at the same time. He saw Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, who usually dressed in black, was wearing a dazzling white gauze dress at this moment. She was looking at him with a very strange look. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu. When Hun was in a cold sweat, and patted his chest with a look of lingering fear, "Can you make a sound when you come over? You really scared me." Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white did not respond, but just looked at Wen Hun with watery eyes. After a long time, she opened her mouth and mouthed, "Come." The gentle voice blew into Wen Hun's mind like a spring breeze, with an inexplicable breath, so warm. Wen Hun stared at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white blankly. He felt a pain in his heart without warning, and sadness surged. He touched his eyes and saw drops of saltiness on his hands. What happened to me? He had never felt this strange feeling. Was it an attack? He soon became alert, and remembered the master's entrustment. He stared at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white and said, "Sister, do you hear any sound?" Suli raised her eyebrows. "Did you hear what she said?" When Hun nodded solemnly, and slowly pulled out the gray knife from the scabbard, "Master is right. Senior Sister Apprentice, you can affect my mood this month, but that's all. I will kill her now." Without hesitation, he leaped up and slashed down with his saber. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white disappeared in a panic. With a flash of white light, she appeared a little further away from Wen Hun. Looking at Wen Hun, her eyes were full of sadness. "You're affecting me again." Wen Hun felt a sharp pain in his heart. He staggered a step and inserted the knife into the ground. He covered his chest with one hand and was about to pull out the knife again. Wait, let's see what she wants to do. Suli stopped him and looked at the face of senior sister apprentice Yu in white with great interest. She smelled a familiar breath and saw a clue. When Hun hesitated for a moment and clenched the blade in his hand, but Master said, "Hee." Suli chuckled. She pointed at the wrinkles between Hun's eyebrows and smoothed them out. "I'm here. What are you afraid of? If she really wants to hurt you, I will kill her with a punch." Su Li's words were calm, which calmed Hun down. "Then listen to you, sister." Hun nodded his head hesitantly. Suddenly, he found that the pain in his heart was relieved a lot. He took a deep breath. "She seems to want to take us to a place." Su Li's eyes flickered, and she chuckled. "Let's go and have a look." As Su Li said this, there was a momentary vibration at the end of the mountain road. Although the time was very short, it didn't escape her perception. "It seems that the little pig is very bold." Black Lotus was speechless. He was old and shrewd and had seen a lot of oddities. Su Li must have seen more than him. The white shadow appeared and disappeared from time to time. Every time it appeared, it moved a distance of several meters. Hun had never seen this kind of movement in any ghost. He was full of vigilance, but his eyes couldn't help falling on the white shadow. Even he didn't know what attracted him. This feeling was too strange. When Hun touched his heart, full of confusion, the momentary pain almost killed him, but he didn't hate it or hate it at all. "It's so strange." Su Li kept walking. No matter what strange terrain the white shadow walked on, or integrated into the mountain rocks, she could flatten it with one foot or punch through it with one punch. There was no obstacle. Hun followed her in a trance, and turned a deaf ear to the sound around him. After advancing in this manner for 2 hours, a flat stone wall appeared before the two of them. The stone wall was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been deliberately polished. Su Li integrated the white shadow into it. When she was about to punch it, she suddenly raised her eyebrows and took back her fist. Then she walked to the stone wall and reached out to touch it gently. Buzz! The ripples spread, and the stone wall gradually became transparent. Then, a stony mountain mansion came into Hun's eyes through a transparent barrier, which was full of astonishment. "You are." Hun walked to the stone wall absent-mindedly, and looked at the tall young man sitting in the mountain mansion. The young man's face was exactly the same as his, and they were 80% similar. Senior sister apprentice Yu, in white, nestled beside the young man. Her lips squirmed as if she was saying something, but neither Su Li nor Hun could hear it. It seemed that after hearing the words of Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white, the young man raised his head and looked straight at the outside of the stone wall, but he didn't look at Hun. He said calmly, and his voice came out of the stone wall. "I heard from your mother that Insi didn't expect that we would meet. Hun, you have suffered these years." Hun trembled all over, and looked at the young man in the stone wall incredulously. He fell down along the stone wall and muttered, "Impossible, I am an orphan, I am," as he said. He suddenly trembled all over. His memory! How could he remember the memory when he was still in infancy? Those were all told by the master. This stone wall can only be seen from the outside. "I heard from your mother that you look like me. She recognized you at the first sight." The young man smiled in a carefree manner, but his words were filled with a strong sense of guilt and helplessness. "I never thought that you would still be alive. I'm sealed here and can't move an inch. I can't do anything, and I'm not qualified to be your father. However, since you're here, are you willing to talk to this incompetent father of yours?" Hun's lips trembled. The sudden truth made him unable to distinguish the truth from the falsehood. His mind went blank and he couldn't say a word. Su Li wiped the stone wall beside Hun, sat down against it and chuckled. "It seems that you are the new ghost that he just mentioned?" Hun trembled, and his nerves were a little numb because of the shock. His nerves were numb from the shock. He muttered, "New ghosts." The young man stopped smiling and looked cold. But the words of "Senior Sister Apprentice you" in white eased his expression quickly. He said, "New ghost? Is that what Insi said? I am Wen Hun's biological father, Wen Yuanqing." Insi? Su Li raised her eyebrows. "It's what the ghost under the hall of the Lord said." "According to what you said, that thing is Insi? It seems that you don't know anything." Wen Yuanqing shook his head. It seemed that he didn't want to talk about it. "Since you can bring Hun here, you must have some skills. But if you get involved in this matter, you won't have a good end. Leave the Immortal Cultivation sect as soon as possible, and even don't stay in Jojo region anymore." Su Li smiled very brightly, but Black Lotus couldn't help shivering. Someone was going to be unlucky. That little pig really lied to me. Su Li whispered to herself, and touched the cheek of Wen Hun, who was absent-minded. Although she was smiling, her tone was very cold. "Wen Yuanqing, your son was raised by Hijio, and he also practiced ghost chapter. Now he has become neither a human nor a ghost, and he doesn't have much life left. In this case, do you think he can still leave the Immortal Cultivation sect?" Hijio. When Wen Yuanqing heard this, his pupils suddenly shrank. He stood up and was about to step out of the stone wall. But Su Li only took one step, and then she heard countless sounds of chains in the mountain wall. Those invisible chains seemed to lock every bone of Wen Yuanqing. When he took a step out, he felt a sharp pain as if his bones were crushed. But Wen Yuanqing remained calm, and continued to pull the chains to walk out of the stone wall. Snap! 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 The chains broke one after another as they couldn't bear the heavy load. But soon, many chains shot out from the stone wall and reconnected to the port. What followed was an even more terrifying suction. When Yuanqing's body was stretched out, and his head extended far away. "My son." When Yuanqing stretched his head out of the stone wall with difficulty. At a glance, he saw a pale and dispirited face leaning against the stone wall, and the hem of clothes faintly emitting red light. "Insi, I will kill you!" Blue veins stood out all over Wen Yuanqing's body, and he looked ferocious. His eyes shed tears of unwillingness, and the dense chains in the stone wall were tightened at the same time. Bang! When Yuanqing's body exploded into pieces of minced meat falling in the stone house, and then slowly condensed into shape. His face also became as pale as Wen Hun's. "Is it worth it just to see your son?" Su Li picked up a piece of flesh beside her, looked at it, and said with a hint of emotion, "You were really a ghost clan when you were alive. It's interesting to become a ghost clan of ghosts." When Yuanqing gasped slightly, and his body suddenly stiffened when he heard this. "You?" At this moment, a hole suddenly exploded in the originally quiet nothingness, and a familiar face stepped out of the hole. "My disciple, don't believe in nonsense." Seeing Wen Hun's distracted look, Hijio looked a little angry. "I told you that if you hear you talking, you should kill her. Idiot! You actually believe in the words of ghosts and fall into such a situation." Wen Hun raised his head blankly, and looked at Hijio's face. Somehow, he wanted to vomit. Then he looked back at the man who had just shattered his body for him. For a moment, he couldn't distinguish the truth from the lies, and could only look at Su Li imploringly. What should I do?" Chapter 527. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Clatter. The chain was suddenly tightened, and Wen Yuanqing, with a pale face, stood up again. He couldn't see Hijio through the stone wall, but he still looked at Hijio coldly. If his eyes could kill, Hijio would have died thousands of times. Hijio was not affected at all. He walked to Wen Hun, and his face returned to its usual gentleness. He reached out and patted Wen Hun's thin shoulder. "I believe you. The words of ghosts won't make you lose your way." As he said, he turned his eyes to Su Li. A dim light flashed in his eyes, but he cupped his hands and said respectfully, I have received the message from Lord Immortal of Ghost. There is such a strong practitioner like you in NI sect. I wonder why you changed your appearance and came to our sect, for what? As soon as the words came out, Wen Hun's body suddenly shook, and his eyes on Su Li wavered. Yes, he was possessed. Perhaps all these were the inner demons brought by the new ghosts. As long as he didn't listen and see, everything could return to the original state. Master, Su Yu was the Grand Elder of NI sect. She must have other purposes to come to the sect. He couldn't believe it. Was the only one he could believe, the Master? He tried to convince himself, but at this moment, his heart wavered, and he could no longer believe anyone in the field. Su Li's perception was so keen that she saw the change in Wen Hun's eyes. This silly boy was still too young. As the thought flashed through her mind, her eyes became cold, but her lips were slightly raised. The smile was full of deep meaning. I don't deserve to be called as the senior. I heard that Lord he is so powerful that the disciples you sent have infiltrated the Wanli sect, the Liyang sect and other 12 sections. Half of the Jiuzhou region is under your control. Is it true? Ha ha ha. He Jiu chuckled and shook his head. Senior, you think too highly of me. It's difficult for me to maintain the sect, and I don't hesitate to make a deal with ghosts. How can I extend my hand to other sects? Really? Then I misunderstood your sect. Su Li's words seemed to be an apology, but her tone was not apologetic at all. Instead, she said with strong interest, however, it's really an eye-opener for me this time. I heard that there is a Insi in the mountain who cut his own flesh and blood to feed a sect. I really admire him. Can Lord he introduce me to him? He Jio's eyes brightened and he nodded without hesitation. You are a strong man of the human clan. Lord Insi will be very happy to see you. Please come with me. As he said, he glanced at Wen Hun, who was still leaning against the mountain wall behind Su Li. When he was about to speak, he heard Su Li said with a smile, Your disciple Xinxing is simple. This experience is not a bad thing. I think he has understood something. Lord he doesn't have to punish him. Haha, Senior has misunderstood. He Jiu laughed, but his eyes darkened. Wen Hun was still useful. It was a waste to let him follow them. Moreover, with Wen Hun's low cultivation, it was difficult for him to survive, let alone break the stone wall. Everything was under his control. He changed his mind instantly and snorted, I'll give you another chance. Stay here and reflect on your mistakes. If you don't have a heart of stone, you can't cultivate. Then, he smiled again and waved his hand, Senior, this way, please. Su Li glanced at Wen Hun, who was leaning against the stone wall with his head down. She nodded with a smile, and disappeared in the hole with He Jiu. Until the two disappeared, Wen Hun raised his head, and his eyes were full of pain and self-mockery. His lips were bitten by him at some time, and the bloody smell spread in his mouth. Master, sister. Sister is a liar. Your sister is indeed a liar. When Yuanqing, who had been silent all the time, suddenly spoke and interrupted Wen Hun's self-pity. However, she didn't cheat you, but He Jiu. Wen Hun looked back in amazement, and saw Wen Yuanqing's calm but unfocused eyes. He suddenly felt nervous. My son should be able to distinguish right from wrong. When Yuanqing seemed to have figured out Su Li's background, he said in a calm tone, It has been hundreds of years since what happened in those days, but the hatred in my heart has not faded. Instead, it has become stronger. There are some things, whether you believe it or not, you are qualified to know. As he said, he looked at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white beside him. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white nodded, got up and floated out of the stone wall. She looked at Wen Hun with a smile, and then stretched out her transparent fingertip, wanting to touch Wen Hun's glabella gently. Wen Hun resisted and tilted his head back. But when he saw the disappointment on Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white's face, he stopped and let the cold fingertip touch his glabella. Since he couldn't see anything clearly, He chose to follow his instinct this time. A trace of cold touch poured into the awareness sea through the glabella and quickly turned into pictures, which flashed back in front of him. He saw a young practitioner who looked very similar to him came to the foot of the mountain of the immortal cultivation sect with a woman who looked like Senior Sister Apprentice Yu. They talked and laughed all the way, and came to find his friend Hijio. When he saw Senior Sister Apprentice Yu was pregnant, the young man was overjoyed. He believed Hijio's words and went to the Een Mountain to see Insi, so that the fetus in his wife's belly could have a higher starting point on the road of cultivation. Then, under the gloomy and bloody sky, a terrifying giant opened its bloody mouth, and countless masses of rotten flesh wriggled in its mouth, screaming. The young man was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He helplessly watched Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, who was about to give birth, was dismembered and thrown into the hell-like mouth. He angrily used the forbidden skill of Ghost Clan and sacrificed everything. Finally, he just cut off a mass of rotten flesh and died regretfully. Then, in the long darkness, the soul soaked with unwillingness and hatred seemed to have an incredible change in the Een Mountain. He incarnated into a ghost, crazily devoured the ghosts in the Een Mountain, and took revenge again. This time, Insi was caught off guard and was seriously injured. But Insi was Insi after all. Even if he became a different ghost, he was still defeated. Relying on the immortality of ghosts, Insi didn't waste his strength to kill him, and only sealed him in the mountain wall. In the long years, he broke free from his chains and committed suicide again and again. He tortured himself again and again. The obsession in his heart became stronger and stronger. In the end, he attracted the ghost floating in the Een Mountain and turned it into his wife's appearance. At that moment, he was quiet. His wife was not a ghost, but an inexplicable special existence attached to him. She was very weak, could be seen, could penetrate any matter at will, couldn't be attacked by anyone, and couldn't speak. But he just understood what his wife was expressing. Don't be sad. I will always be with you. The picture seemed to be long, but in fact, everything flashed in Hun's mind in a moment. Suddenly opening his eyes, he leaned against the wall and gasped for breath like a drowning fish. His chest heaved up and down violently, and sweat seeped out of his forehead, causing his hair to stick together. He was in a sorry state. The impact of the truth was too great for him to bear. I thought you were eaten by Insi before you came to this world. After all, it took me a lot of time to become a ghost. There was a deeper meaning on Wen Yuanqing's face. There was a long-lost kindness on his face. The ghost's unique voice made this kindness with a strong sense of weirdness. I don't know what method Hijio used to keep you alive, but you can practice Ghost Chapter of the Immortal Cultivation Sect. Except for the Ghost Clan, you can practice Ghost Chapter without being affected. Your clothes are red, which is a sign of turning into a ghost. You can't continue to practice Ghost Chapter, otherwise the consequences will be unpredictable. Not all ghosts can keep their minds before death, and I am a special case. Wen Hun took a deep breath, closed his eyes and calmed down completely. When Yuanqing closed his mouth and stopped disturbing him. No matter whether Wen Hun believed it or not, that memory could make Wen Hun's temperament to a higher level. After the transformation, no one could predict what Wen Hun would think. When Yuanqing thought that it would take at least 2 hours for Wen Hun to digest all the information. In fact, he opened his eyes in just a few minutes, and his eyes were full of anxiety. Insi and Hijio are on the same side. Isn't my sister in danger? When Yuanqing was stunned, and his heart was inexplicably sour. Then he laughed. It seemed that he was not qualified to be jealous of the woman who led Hijio away. Your sister is extremely smart. When Yuanqing said with a self-deprecating expression, at least she is much smarter than me. She can see something wrong with Hijio at a glance. She just saw Hijio's arrogance just now, so that I can have time alone with you." She deliberately led him away. "But Ainsi can't even beat you. My sister, when Hun gritted his teeth and said. From his memory, he could see that Ainsi's strength was extremely horrible, more horrible than any existence he had ever seen. Even if Su Li destroyed the Hall of the Lord of Sect with one punch as a lesson, he was still incomparable to the Colossus. Before he finished speaking, there was a burst of applause beside Wen Hun, and there was a chuckle in the applause. "Silly boy, I didn't care about you in vain." Su Li's graceful figure appeared out of thin air, and she looked at Wen Hun with a smile. Wen Hun was instantly dumbfounded. He pointed at Su Li, and then turned his head to look at the place where Su Li and He Ju disappeared. "Sister, why didn't you mean that?" Su Li stroked her hair behind her ears and said with a smile, "That is naturally me." He Ju and Su Li talked and laughed all the way to an ancient and huge pavilion in the Een Mountain. "Senior, Lord Ainsi is waiting in the pavilion. I won't go in with you." He Ju cupped his hands and stopped in place. Su Li looked up at the huge pavilion in the dark clouds unhurriedly. In her eyes it was not a pavilion, but a huge ghost with its mouth wide open, waiting for food. "Senior, what are you waiting for?" Seeing Su Li didn't go in, He Ju asked with a smile. There was no sense of urgency in his words. Su Li smiled sweetly. "I'm just thinking about the meat in the room 2 days ago, which was given by Senior Ainsi. If I don't eat that piece of meat, it will go moldy. If Senior Ainsi gives me more, how can I keep it? It's really worrying." He Ju's smile froze on his face. Chapter 528. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second, wonderful pop-up window free reading. It was obviously not appropriate to discuss the topic of Ainsi's flesh and blood in front of Ainsi. He Ju laughed awkwardly and didn't know what to say to trick Su Li. At this time, he suddenly heard a strong thought from Ainsi. "Extremely pure ghost energy. She is the best blood food like Wen Yuanqing, even better than Wen Yuanqing. After eating her, I can restore my peak strength and even go further." He Ju's expression froze for a moment, and then his eyes immediately turned into surprise. An emperor of the human clan and ghosts were of different origins, so the benefits were limited. In addition, he was afraid of Su Li's unknown background. Originally, he only planned to let Ainsi control this woman, and then let her go and continue to be dormant. But after hearing Ainsi's words, he immediately forgot all the cautiousness. If Ainsi could recover, he didn't have to worry at all. He straightened his bowed back, and a weird smile spread rapidly on his face. "Your Excellency, there is one thing I think you should understand." "What?" Su Li's attention was attracted, but she didn't see a purple-black arc suddenly burst out like thunder behind her. Puff! The ferocious scale armor pierced her chest from behind. "Ha ha ha ha!" He Ju swung his ferocious purple tail and pulled it out from Su Li's chest. "What, Emperor?" I was expecting. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly noticed that there was no blood on the bloody hole in Su Li's chest. "It's a trap." His expression changed slightly. Without saying a word, he stamped his feet and a gust of wind rose. He retreated quickly with the box. But he only retreated a few feet, and his figure was forcibly stagnated in the air. He didn't know when his thick purple-black scale tail was firmly pinched by a slender hand. Su Li raised her head slightly, and her eyes under her hair were like a pitch-black deep pool, full of pity. "It turns out to be a small lizard. It's old, and its meat is not very delicious. You are courting death." He Ju had never been so humiliated, especially by his recognized food. He immediately became angry, and the purple-black muscles bulged from the loose skin. In the blink of an eye, he broke the disguise of the human clan and turned into a ghost lizard with a height of 30 feet. His hands turned into claws like sharp knives and stabbed at Su Li's eyes. "It's really barbaric food." Su Li licked her red lips, and the light in her eyes faded away. She no longer suppressed the nature of evil ghosts. At the moment when Hijio's claws pierced into Su Li's eyes, Su Li seemed to melt like ice and snow. She turned into a pool of black liquid, and quickly climbed up along the claws. At the same time, a tingling pain came from her arms to her brain, as if there were thousands of mouths gnawing at her flesh and blood in the pool of liquid. What the hell? It can actually devour me. I'm a ghost. Hijio was shocked, and an unprecedented fear rose in his heart. He screamed, "Insi, do it! Save me!" Boom! The pavilion in the dark clouds collapsed in the blink of an eye. Lumps of rotten flesh quickly gathered together from the collapsed pavilion, turning into a mountain of flesh. The mountain of flesh squirmed for a while, and countless legs grew out from its bottom. It was surprisingly agile, and in the blink of an eye, it flashed behind Hijio, opened its huge mouth, and swallowed Hijio along with it. "I'll eat it." A huge face appeared on the surface of Insi's flesh mountain. He burped and his whole body squirmed. White steam rose from his body as he tried his best to digest the food. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. He opened his trembling mouth and took a deep breath. Whoosh! An extremely strong suction appeared out of thin air. The wind and clouds changed, and the whole Een mountain was raging. Countless ghosts screamed and were sucked into the mouth of the mountain of flesh. Even the dead trees around were pulled off the ground and flew to the mountain of flesh. Why is the wind suddenly blowing? When Hun stood up in surprise, and looked at the source of the suction from a distance. Because of the seal on the mountain wall, the suction he felt was very small, but he still felt dizzy and his soul was unstable. The power of the seal is getting weaker. When Yuanqing's eyes flashed, and his unfocused sight fell on the Numa beside Wen Hun. Insi is stalled. "Sister, this," Wen Hun was about to ask, and suddenly there was a loud noise in his ears. Boom! It seemed that something exploded. Blood dyed half of the sky and then fell down. Wen Hun subconsciously caught a piece of debris flying over. He fixed his eyes on it and found it was a wriggling rotten flesh. He was so scared that he immediately threw it away. At this moment, there was a harsh scream in his ears. He looked up and saw a stream of light zooming in his eyes like a meteor. Boom! The earth quaked and the mountain shook. The stream of light fell into the hard rocks of Een Mountain, and the whole ground cracked like a spider web. The cracks extended along the ground to the stone wall, and a strong and cold Numa escaped from the cracks. Clatter, the chain rattled. When Yuanqing stood up, and saw the figure in the center of the crack at the same time as Wen Hun. That was the evil ghost, which had been digested with only half of its body. Its surface was stained with a lot of yellow water stains, and the remaining part was still corroding tirelessly. What is this? Wen Hun only felt that his scalp was numb, but he did not look away. Soon he found a trace of familiarity from the corroded half-face, and couldn't help but widen his eyes. At this time, half of the evil ghost's body suddenly stood up like a corpse. The ghost energy around it vibrated, and all the yellow water stains were shaken off. Then it returned to the shadow as Su Li waved her hand. My speed of devouring is not as fast as Insi. It seems that the means of Ghost Clan are not enough. Su Li's eyes flickered, and she saw the huge black shadow approaching slowly in the distance. She gently covered the stone wall with her palm and said, Wen Hun, retreat to the back of the mountain. Wen Hun trembled all over, and immediately retreated to the back of the mountain. He had been shocked too many times tonight, and his heart had been numb. At this moment, even if the sky fell down, he could not be more shocked. Seeing this, Su Li turned her head, and her red lips curved slightly. The golden thunder in her palm instantly filled the gap. Boom! The stone wall was torn and collapsed directly like a piece of fragile white paper. When Yuanqing, who was still secretly accumulating power, was slightly stunned. He punched in the air, which made him a little uncomfortable. However, he quickly adapted to it. When he smelled the pneuma of divine thunder in the air, he couldn't help but shrink his pupils and was secretly horrified. Why is there the pneuma of divine thunder? Is it her means? At the same time, Su Li's voice came, and her tone was a little meaningful. Protect your son, and you'd better stay away. When Yuanqing's eyes flashed with fear, and he pulled Wen Hun to retreat. He just got out of trouble, and was very weak, so he couldn't help. Besides, he was really afraid that he would be destroyed by the divine thunder. Insi didn't dare to lead to the test of thunder, but this woman was not a ghost. If she had the means of thunder, she might be able to kill Insi. Boom! Boom! Hills were flattened one after another, and Insi's huge figure slowly appeared in everyone's sight through the mist. His pale and pitted skin looked very gloomy and horrible under the moonlight. In the center of the mountain of flesh, there was a basin-sized bloody hole. The rotten flesh squirmed, and the bloody hole was constantly shrinking. He-Jiu, who turned into his original body, stood on the top of the mountain of flesh. At this moment, his arms that were devoured by Su Li had grown out again. He looked at Su Li with bloodshot eyes. You are the first one who dares to destroy my original body in thousands of years. Is that the true face of He-Jiu? In the distance, Wen Hun's eyes were blank. At this moment, he finally recognized the truth. Everything he saw in that memory was true. Su Li smiled sweetly. Her petite figure standing under the mountain of flesh looked very small. The taste of ghosts is very good. At least, my shadow likes you very much. As soon as these words came out, even the ghost, who represented horror, couldn't help but feel a chill. He was furious and stopped talking nonsense. Insi, eat her. The mountain of flesh squirmed for a while, and the chilly wind blew. The fierce suction force acted on Su Li's whole body again. But the state of evil ghost in Su Li's original body couldn't be compared with a single evil ghost. She raised her eyebrows, stepped on a crack under her feet, and disappeared instantly. So fast! What a strong physical body! When Yuanqing marveled in his heart. He had never seen a human clan that could refine their physical body to such a degree. Could it be that the weakness of the human clan's physical body had been eliminated in Qingshui Circle after the rule changed? Bang! Su Li punched the mountain of flesh, and the shock wave rippled. The surrounding flesh and blood instantly exploded into holes, and countless rotten flesh fell down. But in the blink of an eye, the holes were filled by rotten flesh again. Su Li didn't intend to stop at all. Relying on the absolute speed, she turned into a sky full of residual shadows, and the mountain of flesh bloomed everywhere. When Yuanqing frowned and couldn't help but remind her, Insi's body is very small. What you hit is the rotten flesh on the surface of his body. It can't cause any damage at all. Boom! Su Li punched another bloody hole with a width of 30 meters again, as if she didn't hear it. It was rare for a human target to stand her full strength. How could she be willing to kill it at once? He-Jiu, who blended into the protection of the rotten flesh, looked at Su Li, who was beating crazily outside, and he was shocked and angry. Why? My means don't have any effect. How could he let Su Li beat Insi violently? At this moment, he almost used all the means of ghosts such as poison, illusion, erosion, infiltration, and so on, but Su Li didn't respond at all. Was she still a fragile human clan? What are you waiting for? No matter how many layers of flesh I have, I shouldn't waste them like this. Insi's angry thought came. He had never been humiliated by a little bug since he had consciousness. Now he just wanted to end it quickly and eat this little bug to restore his strength. He-Jiu was aggrieved. Seeing that Insi's thought became colder and colder, he finally told the truth. Do you think I don't want to? All my means are useless to her. What? Insi's body trembled. He was much older than He-Jiu, so he immediately thought of the natural enemy of ghosts that had been extinct for a long time. He was extremely timid, so he didn't say a word. Hundreds of feet grew out from the bottom of his feet, and he retreated quickly. Want to escape? Suli narrowed her eyes and sighed softly. It's really boring. Before she finished speaking, her figure had disappeared like a phantom, and then appeared on the head of Insi, who was moving quickly. This time, even when Yuanqing didn't see it clearly. She became faster. She has never shown her real strength. When Yuanqing's pupils shrank suddenly, and he pulled Wen Hun to hide further subconsciously. The next moment, a golden line between heaven and earth dispersed the dark clouds. Chapter 529. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second. Wonderful pop-up window free reading. Cloud-piercing golden line. Even if it was far away, when Yuanqing could smell the strong smell of sharp divine thunder drifting from a distance. It's really divine thunder of gold. Is this person a disciple of the holy sect of Wind Thunder? But the stubborn people of the holy sect of Wind Thunder are always hotheads. When they see something contaminated with ghost energy, they will boast of being righteous and kill it. After she killed the evil ghost, the next one, he frowned and said in a deep voice, "Let's go and have a look." Wen Hun had long wanted to know the situation of the battle, so he immediately followed when Yuanqing. Sizzle, under the action of divine thunder, the rotten flesh was irreversibly consumed. Finally, Insi revealed his real body, a black pig as tall as 2 people. It turns out that you are really a little pig. It seems that the one under the Hall of the Lord is your clone. Suli stopped the bombardment of divine thunder and summoned Song Lei's cave to hover over Insi's head. Another more powerful breath of divine thunder instantly shrouded them, making Insi and Hijio completely desperate. "Sister Li, what is this? It disgusts me so much." In Song Lei's cave, Su Bai stretched out a thunder branch and then took it back. He pointed to Hong Baiju, who lived at the other end of Song Lei's cave, "But it's not as annoying as her." Hong Baiju's little face became serious, and she transmitted the sound in disgust. "I hate you too. In a sense, you are each other's natural enemies. But now you are all mine, so you are not allowed to fight." Suli transmitted the sound, and Su Bai nodded obediently. The little girl Hong Baiju immediately put away her fierce expression and shrank back to the depth of Song Lei's cave. Suli laughed in her heart. Divine thunder and ghosts were supposed to kill each other as soon as they met. It was also a wonder that such a harmonious side appeared under her control. Insi and Hijio saw that Suli was distracted, but the breath of divine thunder above their heads was more magnificent than that of Jinwu. They could not find a chance to escape at all. "Now I ask and you answer. Do you hear me clearly?" Suli looked back at them, and her tone was as leisurely as 2 days ago. But Insi could no longer act as calmly as before. He trembled and panicked. "Emperor, please spare my life. Everything is planned by thousand-faced ghosts. It has nothing to do with me." "Who is the thousand-faced ghost?" Before Insi answered, Suli heard a voice behind her. "The thousand-faced ghost is Hijio. Hijio is my bosom friend. After being eaten by the thousand-faced ghost, the thousand-faced ghost changed into Hijio's appearance and tricked me into a dead end." When Yuanqing stood not far from Suli, he originally wanted to sound out her background, but when he thought of her overbearing character just now, he finally swallowed his words of testing. Suli nodded gently, and her gentle eyes fell on Hijio. "So, tell me, how is the plan to control the 12 sects going? The longer one lived, the more one cherished his life." Hijio, no, the thousand-faced ghost, couldn't jump out of this rule either. He scolded Insi in his heart for betraying him even when he was about to die. After a moment of silence, he braced himself and asked, "If I tell you, can you spare my life?" Suli raised her eyebrows and said in a gentle tone, "Give me a reason to let you go." "We can't let him go." When Yuanqing was full of hatred, but he couldn't calm down after all. He couldn't help but say, "The thousand-faced ghost is cunning and vicious. He is definitely a scourge. We can't let him live." Su Li glanced at Wen Yuanqing. Although she didn't show any intention, Wen Yuanqing was stiff all over, and the alarm in his heart rang loudly. This was a warning. She was warning me not to meddle in other people's business. To this end, this woman is definitely not as gentle and kind as she looks on the surface. She is not a member of the Holy Fenglei sect. She may also be an alien of the Holy Fenglei sect. Several thoughts flashed through Wen Yuanqing's mind, and he was more afraid of Su Li. Wen Hun was young, but he couldn't see things as deeply as his father. He just thought secretly that Sister Su controlled the life and death of ghosts. How awesome! Did you hear that? You are a scourge. Why should I let you live? Su Li said slowly, and the golden thunder arc lingered on her fingertips. Wen Yuanqing immediately retreated a few steps without a trace. Your Excellency, I'm useful. I'm absolutely useful. He Jiu seemed to have grabbed onto a straw before drowning, and he desperately said, the key figures of the 12 sects are all under my control. So long as Your Excellency Emperor gives the order, the 12 sects will be at your disposal. Ho ho, Wen Yuanqing sneered, and undermined him. I taught you the secret method of controlling people, which is a method of our ghost clan. Since you are loyal to this senior, why don't you hand over the control jade token? That will show your sincerity, isn't it? He Jiu's face turned blue, and he stared at Wen Yuanqing. He transmitted the sound gloomily. Don't forget that you are also a ghost. She controls the divine thunder, and it's easy for her to kill us. If you help her now, you will die in the end. Wen Yuanqing scratched his ears and said lightly, transmitting the sound in front of me, it seems that you are not going to be loyal to this Her Excellency Emperor. He Jiu's face was completely gloomy, and he pinched an emerald jade token in his hand. The awe for Su Li in his eyes faded away, and he was full of desperate madness. Let me go. Otherwise, I will crush the jade token. No one can get the right to control the 12 sects. Wen Yuanqing sneered, thousand-faced ghost, it seems that you are old, and your memory is not very good. Let me help you recall. The means of our ghost clan usually have a back door, and only our ghost clan can control it. If I haven't got out of trouble, you can do whatever you want. But in front of me, do you want to die together with me? No way. He Jiu's pupils shrank suddenly, and he was shocked. At the moment when he was distracted, the thunder in Song Lei's cave poured down, and burned He Jiu into ashes in the blink of an eye. Jingle! The emerald jade token fell to the ground, and automatically flew into Su Li's hand. Wen Yuanqing calmed down and said calmly, there is no back door in the means of our ghost clan. What we did just now was to deceive the thousand-faced ghost, so you can use this jade token at ease. Su Li glanced up at Wen Yuanqing's tense face, and said with a chuckle, of course, I know the means of the ghost clan. You don't have to explain. Seeing this, Wen Hun suddenly realized, it turns out that it was all a trap set by my sister and my father. Thinking of the word father, Wen Hun suddenly became more like a thief, and shrank back without a trace. Although he hadn't accepted the sudden appearance of father, he thought in his heart that no one would find it. Insi was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He Jiu was still alive and kicking a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, he was the only one left? I heard that your flesh and blood can enhance the soul? Su Li put away the jade token and then asked. Insi was stunned and immediately nodded wildly. Yes, my flesh and blood can enhance the soul. As long as I don't die, I can be reborn. As soon as he finished speaking, Wen Yuanqing said faintly, he is lying. Insi's flesh and blood are useless. What they provide to the disciples of the immortal cultivation sect is the flesh and blood of another mysterious ghost. If you eat too much of that flesh and blood, you will become a ghost and become their food. Those of the human clan that they let go have been brainwashed long ago in order to go down the mountain for him. They bring new potential food. Insi was suddenly frightened. How do you know? The Ghost Clan has a talent called Virtual Eye, which can see all the scenes within 100 miles. This is the most useless talent in the Ghost Clan. When Yuanqing grinned when he said this, you never set up the isolation matrix when you talk with the thousand-faced ghost. After hundreds of years, it is enough for me to know all your secret. After that, when Yuanqing turned his eyes and said to Suli, "This time, what I said is true." Suli raised her eyebrows, and the thunder and lightning poured down from the cave. Even for the revenge of Wenhun, I never intend to let them live. Suli curled her lips. What I said is also true. When Yuanqing, in the belly of Yin Mountain, when Yuanqing took Suli and Wenhun to a bloody mountain of flesh. This is the place where Yinsi and others collect flesh. I heard that the owner of the immortal cultivation sect here, before when Yuanqing finished his words, he suddenly felt a very cold pneuma coming to his face. Then a red and white dress flashed by. The little girl stood in front of the mountain of flesh with a red face and cried, "Don't look at it!" When Yuanqing stared at her slightly. This little girl, no. The pneuma of the little ghost was exactly the same as that of the mountain of flesh. Suli laughed out. "It turns out that this is your original body. You are actually turned into meat." The little girl was immediately anxious, and tears of blood flowed down from her eyes. "Don't laugh!" The mountain of flesh was taken away by the little girl as expected. Although she didn't know where Hong Baizhu put it, it didn't prevent her from knocking it into Tsang Lei's cave, so Suli didn't bother to investigate it. Suli didn't want to stay here any longer, and directly left the mess of the immortal cultivation sect to one Yuanqing. Within 8 years, I want to see a ghost sect that I can use. When Yuanqing was shocked and his eyes brightened. I will live up to your expectations. At the gate of the soul cultivation sect. When Hun watched Suli go away, and his expression was still a little blank. In just 2 days, his life had undergone earth-shaking changes. It was like a dream. When Yuanqing smiled and said slowly, "People's fate is changeable, like the clouds in the sky and the dogs in the sky. Don't feel confused. We can have a promising future if we follow her. But I have entered the erosion period, and I will degenerate into a ghost in a year at most. How can I talk about the future?" When Hun was very frustrated. When Yuanqing was suddenly stunned. He sniffed and couldn't help frowning. "My senses can't be wrong. Although you have a trace of the smell of the red dress, it is still far from becoming a ghost. Even if you keep practicing Ghost Chapter, it will take at least 200 years. How can there be the erosion period? Did I make a mistake?" When Hun was relieved when he heard the words and then said strangely, "But my body has become inexplicably relaxed recently, and I don't feel tired." When Yuanqing smiled slightly. Obviously, he was a gloomy ghost, but his smile was gentle. "Someone has helped you to recuperate secretly. Think about what you have refined or eaten recently." When Hun was still not used to communicating with his father, who suddenly appeared. He scratched his head subconsciously, and then the time when he ate in Su Li's courtyard for 3 meals a day suddenly flashed in his mind. "I see." He was suddenly enlightened, and then he felt warm and bitter in his heart. Those days will never come again. Chapter 530. Remember in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. You've finally come back. Hua Yen came over and rolled her eyes. Then she asked, "Yen Zai and others have been waiting outside the mountain gate for 2 months, but you didn't summon them. Is the rumor about the immortal cultivation sect true or false?" Suli raised her hand and showed the jade rune. It was rare for her to show off. "I do it in person. There is no reason to fail." Speaking of this, she raised her eyebrows. "Ask Zai and others to come back. I have subdued the immortal cultivation sect, but its nature is a bit special, and it is not suitable for other people in the sect to contact." "Special?" Hua Yen raised an eyebrow. Suli said, "Yen, do you believe that there are ghosts in the world?" "Ghost? Hua Yen was puzzled. It's nothing more than a secular saying. It's a hallucination caused by mortals being contaminated with yin qi. You and I are cultivators. How can we believe this? Su Li shook her head and smiled, saying faintly, maybe for today's clear Qingshui circle, you are right, but there are ghosts in the world. At least there are many in the immortal cultivation sect. If you are curious, you can go and have a look. Hua Yen felt her hair stand on end, and a layer of goosebumps appeared all over her body. She laughed and scolded, I haven't seen you for 2 months, and your ghost story has improved. You can even fool me. Su Li was helpless. What I said is true. Only a ghost would believe you. Hua Yen rolled her eyes. I'm going to inform Yen Zai. As for going to the immortal cultivation sect, forget it. It's tiring enough to help you manage this small territory. Since the immortal cultivation sect has surrendered to us, we will see each other in the future. Hua Yen snorted and floated away. Su Li couldn't help laughing and ignored her. She looked down at the jade rune in her hand that had recognized her as the owner. The jade talisman was real. This had been verified by the Black Lotus, so there could be no mistake. After thinking for a while, Su Li sent a majestic thought to the jade token. Everyone, come see me. In the wilderness where spiritual energy was sparse, the mountain winds howled, and all that entered their eyes was a desolate place. This was a place that cultivators wouldn't even be willing to linger for a second. On the peak of the mountain, a black lotus quietly bloomed at the corner of the beautiful woman's eyes. Her delicate face carried a coldness that did not match her age. The strong wind blew, and her white dress fluttered. It was as if she was about to ascend to heaven in the next moment. Suddenly, shwa 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 shwa. Streaks of light rapidly approached and descended, turning into 12 faces of varying heights, young and old. Without exception, all of them were at the early stage of soul formation. With this number, the immortal cultivation sect could at least enter the top 3 of the 25 sections. You're all quite punctual. Did you come together? A sweet and clear voice rang in everyone's ears. Su Li turned around with a light smile. When everyone saw that the person who had summoned them was not He Jiao, but a woman, all the guesses that they had made on the way here were instantly overturned. Everyone's faces were filled with uncertainty. Su Li squinted her long and narrow eyes, and her curly eyelashes trembled. She said in a cold voice, I am your new master. Although you are controlled, you still have your wit. I like it very much. New master? The only red-dressed female cultivator among the 12 people stepped forward. Her breasts were like billowing waves, and her red lips were like fire. Her beauty was boundless. She looked up and down at Su Li's excessively young face, covered her mouth and chuckled, revealing a pair of sharp eyes. Little sister, did you steal the jade rune from somewhere? How dare you call us here? Aren't you afraid of losing your life? As soon as she said this, the 5 people behind her immediately laughed. Their eyes became unkind. Su Li couldn't help but raise her eyebrows, as if she didn't realize that she had fallen into a dangerous situation. She said with a smile, It seems that the 12 of you are not united. You are the leader of this half, so... She turned her eyes to an ordinary-looking tall and thin practitioner standing in front of her on the other side. The tall and thin practitioner's eyes flashed, and he knelt on one knee without hesitation. Niemingzhe pays respect to the new master. Ha 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 ha. Before Su Li said anything, she heard the woman with makeup trembling with laughter. Niemingzhe, you are really shameless. New master? I'll let her become your dead master immediately. Before she finished her words, the woman with makeup suddenly turned cold, and her black claws instantly grabbed Su Li's head, as if the latter's skull would be crushed in the next moment. Stop! Niemingzhe shouted angrily, but his hands didn't move, and the 5 people behind him also didn't move. Su Li tilted her head and smiled. She didn't move, boom! The woman with makeup spat out blood and flew backward. She turned into a red shadow, and shot out like a cannonball. She hit a long pit and didn't stop until she hit several feet into the mountain wall. Her whole body hung on the mountain wall, and her pneuma instantly weakened. Everyone behind the female practitioner with makeup changed their expressions. What happened just now? Nieminger swallowed his saliva and said loudly, Master's cultivation is unparalleled, and she is mighty. Before he finished his words, Suli waved her hand, and the latter also spat out blood and flew backward. He was swept out dozens of feet away. Now, the other 5 people who were still glad that they stood on the right side also turned pale and froze in the same place. The female practitioner with makeup got up first. Her clothes were ragged, and her face was swollen. She kept coughing up blood. Nieminger crawled for a long time, but he couldn't get up. He was more seriously injured than the female practitioner with makeup. You two, one is a brainless fool, and the other is a fence-sitter. I don't like either of you. Suli pinched the jade token with both hands and shook it. Her tone was full of disgust. If you hadn't lurked in the 25 sects for a long time, I wouldn't have kept you alive. You should be glad that you still have some value. As soon as she said that, an invisible pressure shrouded them. Everyone lowered their heads and didn't dare to look directly at Suli, especially those who laughed just now. They were afraid that they would be seriously injured in an instant like Nieminger and Suli. Suli raised her eyebrows. Someone come out to speak. Everyone was stunned. One of the people of Minger's faction stood out and decisively knelt down. Wang Yuan, the law enforcement elder of Wanli sect, greets the new master. With him taking the lead, the rest of the people immediately knelt down one by one. Hu Dao, the 4th elder of the inner branch of Chuanyan sect, greets the new master. Qing Shihai, the 3rd elder of the inner branch of Tianhu Valley, greets the new master. Suli nodded gently and wrote down everyone's names one by one. Then she flicked her fingers, and 2 green lights went into the bodies of the 2 people who were still kneeling under the mountain wall. Which sect are you from? The female practitioner with makeup immediately felt that her injury was mostly healed. She was in awe and bowed down respectfully. Master, I am Mu Hong, the deputy lord of Wanli sect. No wonder you dare to fight as soon as you meet. It turns out that you are in a high position in the 3rd sect. Suli ridiculed. Mu Hong immediately lowered her head in shame. I dare not. I was reckless. Why don't you dare? I think you are very daring. Suli teased and her eyes fell on Nieminger. So, you must be the senior of Liang's sect, the 4th sect? I dare not. Nieminger's scalp was numb. He quickly lowered his head and said in a timid voice, I am the deputy lord of Liang's sect. I have a little power in my hand. I am willing to go through fire and water for you. That's enough. I don't like hypocrisy. Suli waved her hand and looked indifferent. I don't care whether you are sincere or hypocritical. You are in a high position all year round, and it is normal for you to have some thoughts. But in front of me, Suli said coldly, you'd better put it away. Everyone was shocked and kept quiet out of fear. In 8 years, I will unify the Zhouzhou region. At that time, if you can still obey me, I don't mind making each of you a lord. Suli casually dropped a bomb in everyone's heart. Mu Hong's first thought was that she didn't believe it. But when she thought that the female practitioner in front of her could even snatch things from ghosts, she couldn't help but hesitate. There are not many things you need to do. When you go back, monitor the whereabouts of the most powerful people in the sect, and then send a message to me. The second is to prepare for the attack on Yushu sect and Zihan sect. Nieminger nodded frequently. Then he hesitated for a moment and asked what everyone was thinking. The other 11 sects, Suli smiled. Of course, I will act with you. Everyone was shocked again. In this way, the woman in front of them already had a total of 23 sects in her hands, which was much bigger than the Immortal Cultivation sect. Even the Immortal Cultivation sect has become hers. Mu Hong's pupils shrank suddenly. She nodded without hesitation. Even the horrible ghosts in the Een Mountain were cleaned up by her. What were the other sects? In her opinion, Yushu sect and Zihan sect were not as good as the immortal cultivation sect. I like your attitude. Su Li nodded with satisfaction and smiled. Mu Hong's body was still aching. At this moment, when she heard this sentence, she felt flattered for a while. She had a better understanding of the temperamental character of the new master. Well, go back. I will wait for your news. Don't let me down. Su Li waved her hand. After the crowd bowed, they flew away one after another. Finally, only Mu Hong and Yemingzhi were left. They looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The original hostile relationship disappeared without a trace. They originally insisted on betraying Hijio. Now, a more powerful master suddenly changed, who was so powerful that they were desperate. Any faction was useless. The two put on new clothes from their universe rings, bowed and left. Su Li counted on her fingers and found it only took her about 10 minutes. It's almost time. After dealing with the old bastards of the 12 sects, only the main course is left. Su Li's eyes were cold. Little Su Li, don't be careless. The ghosts of the immortal cultivation sect are restrained by you. For ordinary practitioners, when Yuanqing and Yinsi are equivalent to half a junior emperor, but for you, they are just a little higher than the nature's test. If you fight with Zihan sect and Yushu sect at the same time, you can't defeat 4 people in a junior emperor. Black Lotus couldn't help but remind her. Recently, Su Li had made too big a step. It only took 2 months to solve the problem that should have taken several years. He was really afraid that Su Li would be too excited and directly run to death. Su Li smiled leisurely. How could it be? I am very afraid of death. I will go back and rest for 2 days. I will be busy later. As soon as she finished speaking, a breeze blew. There was no one on the mountain top. Chapter 531. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. After returning to an sect again, Su Li rarely had leisure time. She took out the harvest in Jili region and cooked a few delicacies for Hua Yan and others. Although the memory of Yan Zai, Dongfang Wuxue and others in the reincarnation mirror did not fade, they never thought that Su Li would still be willing to cook after returning to Qingshui's circle. Then, they ate to their heart's content. After all, they didn't have this blessing in the world of the reincarnation mirror. As for LVU and others who didn't know Su Li's origin, they were even more amazed. Su Li was happy to see everyone's reaction. After a few days, they were finally interrupted by the arrival of a person. The main hall covered with green tiles on the top of the mountain was open on all sides. The breeze was gentle, and it was comfortable and pleasant. The woman with heavy makeup carefully walked into the main hall. Looking at the casual and simple layout in the main hall, she felt out of place and couldn't help but feel surprised. How could the new master, who was so overbearing and surly, live in such a refined and elegant place? What are you thinking about? The woman with heavy makeup heard the familiar voice and immediately shivered. She turned to look at the small door connected to the back hall and saw Su Li coming with a smile. Different from the fierce dress of the heavy soul black robe in the past, Su Li wore a pure white gauze dress. She walked silently and looked like a gentle fairy who was above the world. The woman with heavy makeup had already learned what kind of fierce face was hidden under the delicate appearance, so she immediately knelt down. Slave Mu Hong pays respect to the master. Su Li nodded gently and opened her red lips slightly. In the future, you don't need to call yourself slave or master. Just call me master. Since you come to me, you must have gained something, right? Mu Hong only thought it was a means for the new master to win people's hearts. She was calm and quickly replied, Master, I have stayed in Wanli sect for hundreds of years, and only met the Grand Elder once. After that, the Grand Elder practiced in isolation. If it is not related to the survival of the sect, he will not come out. There is no Elders' Union in Wanli sect, and the real power is in the hands of the deputy lords and the Lord. I am the chief deputy lord, so I only need to control the Lord to control the Wanli sect. Suli nodded with appreciation in her eyes. It's rare for you to be so frank when you are in this position. Mu Hong lowered her head and her eyes flashed. Then she said, Sir, you're wrong. You're a strong cultivator. The cultivation world is a place where the strong prey on the weak. If you're not strong enough, you can only be trampled on. Although I, Mu Hong, am arrogant, I respect the strong. You are even more powerful than the Grand Elder of Wanli sect. With you as my backer, why wouldn't I be happy? He, Suli chuckled and said meaningfully, I hope you are telling the truth. Mu Hong's heart tightened. She raised her head and said, I'm here to show my loyalty. Although the 12 of us are the pawns of the immortal cultivation sect, we have already formed our own camp. I have also placed a lot of spies in the other 11 sections. Niemingzhi seems to have a sign of betrayal. At present, I don't know whether he has exposed your existence. This matter is critical. You must deal with it carefully. There's such a thing? Suli still smiled. I'll arrange someone to deal with this matter. You stay for a while, and I'll send someone to meet you. Then, Suli waved her hand and walked away. I still have a dish on the stove. It can't be burned. Seeing that the new master didn't seem to take her words seriously at all, Mu Hong's heart sank. She suddenly began to doubt whether she had taken the right step. It's no wonder. Anyone who controls the power of the 12 sects will inevitably be proud and look down on other sections. But the distribution of the power of the 25 sects is uneven. If Yushu sect knew in advance and cooperated with Niemingzhi, Mu Hong was secretly disappointed. Not long after, strange footsteps sounded. Yen Zai walked over with a cold expression. A familiar pressure came over to Mu Hong, which made her feel a chill in her heart and gave birth to a little hope. The person who met her was not a simple person. Burp! An ear-piercing burp broke the silence, and Mu Hong's solemn expression instantly became sluggish. Yen Zai was speechless and looked embarrassed. Damn it, the dishes you made are so delicious that I accidentally ate more. LVU, who was observing in secret, almost laughed out loud. You called that a little bit more? If you hadn't eaten indiscriminately, the master wouldn't have made another pot. Ahem, with a cough, Yen Zai forcibly covered up the embarrassment and said coldly, Follow me. Mu Hong followed Yen Zai to a side hall. The decoration of the hall was extremely simple. There were shelves on all sides of the walls, on which a large number of jade slips were piled. They were wrapped by the isolation tactical matrix. In the center, there was a set of wooden tables and chairs. Sit down. Mu Hong sat down and was about to emphasize the importance of Niemingzhi's matter. Yen Zai waved his hand and said, Don't worry. I've got the news from the master about what you said. It's not urgent. The Lord of Liang sect has been out recently. As you said, Niemingzhi will definitely choose to contact the first elder of Liang sect. I'll ask Dong Minglan. Mu Hong was stunned. Dong Minglan? Wasn't she the first elder of Liang sect? Ask her directly. Before she could ask, Yen Zai had already flicked out a crystal-clear communication talisman and disappeared into the void. Not long after, a similar communication jade talisman was sent back, and a familiar voice sounded through the jade talisman. This female cultivator's voice, which was very majestic in Mu Hong's memory, was gentle at the moment. Deputy Lord Yen, it's true. Niemingzhi has been controlled by me. I will never let him affect the master's plan. So, how should we deal with Niemingzhi? After hearing this, Mu Hong finally understood. No wonder the new master was not anxious at all. It turned out that Liang sect had been infiltrated long ago. Dong Minglan is the master's person. Then Liang sect. Mu Hong remembered what Suli said before and couldn't help but ask, didn't the master say that she only controlled 11 sects? Yen Zai raised his eyebrows, which was very similar to Su Li's usual way. The master did completely control only 11 sects, but she never said that we only infiltrated 11 sections. Mu Hong was shocked by the huge amount of information and couldn't breathe smoothly. Her pupils shrank and she tentatively asked, "Then the lord of my Wanli sect?" Yen Zai smiled, "Not yet. Apart from you, there are only a few mediocre vice sect masters who have submitted." Just, Mu Hong felt cold in her heart. Could she believe this sentence? She thought she had seen everything about the new master, but after coming today, she found that what she saw turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg. It's ridiculous that I was wavering before. Mu Hong thought with lingering fear. If she was not firm, she might end up like Niemingzhi. Relax. Yen Zai smiled and began to comfort Mu Hong very familiarly. The master is not as terrible as you think. Although you are controlled by the master, you still have your sanity. You are lucky. As long as you don't betray us, there are many benefits. You will know in the future. Mu Hong forced a smile. She nodded, but her pale face still betrayed her inner uneasiness. Yen Zai was not in a hurry. He had done this kind of work most of these years, and he had long been familiar with it. He let Mu Hong go back first and find a chance to trick the lord out. When the Wanli sect fell into his hands, Mu Hong couldn't do anything. Thinking of this, Yen Zai reached out and waved his hand. A register flew out of the shelf, on which there were densely packed names. Yen Zai turned to the last page and started to write. Mu Hong, Huashan Realm. Although she has some courage, her state of mind is deviated. She can barely be regarded as the third class. Whether she will be cultivated in the future depends on observation. After drawing 3 red circles, Yen Zai threw away the pen, stood up, and rubbed his stomach, muttering, "Working is really exhausting. Forget it, I'll go to Sir's place and have a bowl of rice, just one bowl." After Mu Hong went back, she tried her best to trick the lord of the Wanli sect out. With the cooperation from both inside and outside, it didn't take much effort for Su Li to take over the sect. It was worth mentioning that the lord of the Wanli sect was tough and refused to yield. Su Li could only make him a member of the Soul Tactics. When Mu Hong saw this scene, she became even more terrified. The thoughts in her mind had long been thrown out of her mind. With Mu Hong taking the lead, the remaining 10 people followed her example and tried their best to trick the lord of their sect. They even competed with each other in speed, for fear that they would be at a disadvantage because they were too slow. As for Niemingzhi, he was naturally in the hands of Dong Minglan and went to the place where he should go. Deputy Lord Nie has not returned since he went down the mountain. Now his soul tablet is broken. I am afraid that he has met with an accident. Jiuzhou region is in troubled times. Don't spread this matter to prevent accident. Dong Minglan said cautiously. All the elders of the Liang sect nodded one after another. The lord sighed in his heart, but he agreed on the surface. What Minglan said is right. The Jiuzhou region is in a precarious situation. We should integrate the fighting power of the sect in case of a sudden war. As soon as the words came out, Dong Minglan narrowed her eyes and nodded with a smile. Lord, you are farsighted. We will obey you. Seeing that the 2 big shots of the sect all nodded, the rest of the elders naturally did not dare to raise any objections and voted in favor. Your Excellency, it doesn't matter if you can't understand me now. I have chosen a clear path. From now on, you and I are in the same boat. Please take care of me. Hearing the transmitted sound from the woman beside him, the lord closed his eyes and fell into complete silence. Since then, in just 8 months, Su Li had taken action 12 times. She completely eliminated the remaining stubborn forces and completely unified the 23 sects of the Jiuzhou region into a force. And Mu Hong finally knew that there were 19 sects that the new master had infiltrated. Even without their appearance, the new master would do this, but it would take a little more time. Look, Yen, I thought it would take 10 years, but it only took me 3 years to achieve this. Su Li sat by the lake in the back mountain and smiled like a flower. Hua Yin fiddled with the spiritual plant in her hand, looked up and smiled helplessly. She didn't speak. She was afraid that Su Li would be arrogant if she praised her. However, there was still unconcealable amazement in Hua Yan's eyes. Her bosom friend could always accomplish miracles that ordinary people could not imagine. When will we take action next? Su Li stopped smiling and her dark eyes were dim. Don't worry. I will practice in isolation soon. Hua Yin was stunned and then she smiled brightly. Her usual gentle tone revealed a rare murderous intent. The day you come out of isolation is the day we attack. Chapter 532. Book Maze Lu Org, Wonderful Pop-Up Window Free Reading. In a cave 100 meters underground in the depths of an unknown barren mountain in Jiuzhou region, it was so dull that it was difficult to breathe. Su Li glanced around at the seclusion retreat that she had opened up for half a day. Although she should not be disturbed when she practiced in the back mountain of an sect, she would never pin her hopes on the word should because of her cautious temperament. Without thinking too much, Su Li narrowed her beautiful eyes, and her eyes became sharp. She stretched out her right hand and drew a circle. Quietly, the azure blue luster crossed the dazzling trace along her fingertips, and the starry gate appeared again. Compared with the previous 2 times, Su Li's heart was extremely calm. This time, she was more prepared than ever. Her actual combat power had already exceeded her Jindan stage cultivation by 3 levels, and she also had several means to help her. If even she couldn't pass this threshold, then the cultivators who chose this path in ancient times would have died long ago. Don't be careless. Even a lion fights a rabbit with all its strength. I don't need to remind you that you have grown to this level. Su Li nodded gently and took off the treasures such as Black Lotus Ring. She said in a rare serious tone, "Take care of the guys in Song Lei's cave. I will be back soon." Black Lotus rolled his eyes as a response. Su Li smiled slightly, and without hesitation, she turned around and disappeared into the starry gate. It was cold rain in the early morning on the long street of Yunjing. The cold rain fell on Su Li's dazed face, which made her shiver involuntarily. Then she came to her senses. Su Li struggled to climb up from the collapsed and broken wall. She saw the familiar low bluish-gray brick wall, the dilapidated courtyard, the bright bloodstains on the grass, and the approaching figure. Her pupils suddenly shrank. You can still keep so calm in the face of death. You do have some skills. No wonder the young master will be fascinated by you and fall in love with you. Ling Xian, who was supposed to die, walked out gracefully, and her tone was as familiar as ever. This unforgettable familiar scene had long been engraved in her soul. Even if she already knew that everything was an illusion, she could not erase it. It was on this day that her life had undergone earth-shaking changes. I clearly entered the starry gate. Why do you want me to see these? Could it be that the Chuangxing path this time is an inner demon? Su Li thought gloomily. Ling Xian had approached. The 4th elder of the Yinma cult should appear next, and then Su Yu should appear. However, what happened next was far beyond her imagination. Stop, Ling Xian! Along with a furious roar, a figure at the end of the long street approached from afar. In a few flashes, he had arrived. Ling Li picked up the petite girl who was as light as a feather and held her tightly in his arms. His spiritual power poured into her body as if it was free. He always had a gentle face, but the anxiety in his eyes could burn through the sky. Sect Master. The 4th elder walked over and was stunned. What's going on? He looked at Ling Xian inquiringly. However, Ling Xian, who was aggressive just now, was avoiding his eyes. It seemed that she wanted to leave. The 4th elder was no fool, and he immediately understood what was going on. His gaze turned cold, and he moved his feet, faintly sealing off the ladder's movements. It's my carelessness. Looking at the girl who seemed to have fainted in his arms, Ling Li's eyes were full of self-blame. After confirming that Su Li's life was not in danger, he raised his head and looked at Ling Xian. His face instantly became cold, and his lips were like a thin piece of paper, like a cold blade. You are very good. Ling Xian took a deep breath and said righteously, I did it for the young master. You are the chosen one. How noble you are. How can you marry such a commoner? That's simply tarnishing you. Ling Mo, slap her. Slap. Ling Mo withdrew his hand expressionlessly. Looking at Ling Xian's astonished face, he said lightly, You stink. The stench of jealousy could even be smelled by him. Ling Xian's face turned pale, and her lips trembled. She stared at Ling Li and wanted to say something, but finally she said nothing and left in a panic. Child? Ling Mo walked to Ling Li and asked him. The meaning in his eyes was self-evident. Ling Li closed his eyes and felt the softness in his arms. He was more and more angry, but his mind was extremely sober. He said calmly, Fourth Elder, do you know your crime? At this moment, Fourth Elder had received the sound transmitted by Third Elder, and he was extremely regretful. Hearing Ling Li's words, he immediately lowered his head. I listened to the holy girl's lies, and I know my crime. Then, the holy girl Ling Xian tried to kill Madame Hierarch but failed. She has committed a heinous crime. You will be responsible for hunting her down, regardless of life or death. Fourth Elder was shocked. He looked up and saw the soberness and firmness in Ling Li's eyes. He thought of the sound transmitted by Third Elder and made up his mind. Yes, sir. In the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, there were all kinds of holy things for healing injuries in the large and exquisite wing room. I really can't eat any more. On the bed, Su Li leaned on the porcelain pillow and reluctantly pushed away the tonic sent to her mouth. But Ling Li pulled a long face and was stubborn like a smelly and hard stone. No. You haven't recovered yet. Doctors don't treat themselves. You have to listen to me. Su Li's eyes softened, and she finally picked up the soup and drank it. Ling Li's face became better, and the love in his eyes almost melted. He said softly, Good girl, I will deal with the chores of the cult, and I will come to accompany you soon. Su Li nodded. Ling Li helped her lie down, and then he left reluctantly. The room was quiet again. Su Li was silent for a moment in front of the pink gauze curtain above her head. Then she reluctantly sat up, opened the lining, and gently pressed the scab wound. Hiss, the pain came to her nerves. Su Li took a light breath, and her eyes were full of self-mockery. What is this? The other possibility of time may be better? Then what will happen when this world is broken? Su Li pondered. She stayed in the Ling mansion for 2 months for healing. In addition to dealing with the arrival of Lord Rue, Su Yu and others, she gained something. According to what Black Lotus said, although the test of Chuangxing Path is difficult, it is not difficult for me. But I haven't found a way to break the deadlock so far. It is likely that something unexpected happened in Chuangxing Path. Everything that has happened in the past 2 months feels like it's real. It's like there really is such a branch of time, and I'm like I've taken over another branch of time to exist, and I still have my original memories. So, if I stay here, what will happen? What will be the final ending of me in this branch of time? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, and she finally quieted down. Without the fateful twist, everything in this branch of time was developing in a good direction. Su Li thought for a long time and did not touch those who had life rings. In this timeline, she should not know such things as life rings. The consciousness in Mei Ruhan's mind was also deliberately ignored by her. She wanted to see how far the test of Chuangxing Path could go. With the secret help of the Linli building, the Yinma cult soon controlled nearly 80% of the forces of Dahan. The Dongfang family was a mere figurehead. With the help of the Wanjian sect, the Dongfang family in the spiritual circle could not play a big role. Finally, after weighing the gains and losses, the Yinma cult gave up the arrangement of the Dongfang family. As a result, Han finally came to the end. The change of dynasty. Ling Li, the useless third son of the Ling family, turned out to be the hierarch of the Yinma cult. He ascended the throne and changed the name of the country to Ling. Su Li, the owner of the Linli building, had great foresight and unparalleled wisdom. She was conferred the title of Empress Su, the motherly model of the world. The world was shocked. The whole secular world and the martial arts circle were in shock for several years. The light in Fang Yuan's eyes also completely dimmed in these years, leaving only a faint warmth. It's good that I can help you manage the Linli building. In the Linli building, Fang Yuan held a glass of wine and looked at the towering palace in the city center. He smiled bitterly. In Chuxiu Palace, Su Li, wearing a phoenix crown, was bright and charming. She held a brush in her hand and wrote a word on the rice paper. 6. Mammy Li was confused. She still used the previous title. Miss, what does it mean? Su Li closed her eyes and didn't say anything. She had been in this tributary of time for nearly 6 years. In the first few years, she acted according to her original temperament, and everything ran normally. But in order to make things go smoothly, she couldn't hold back and predicted the future several times. It also included that she frightened Jing Xian with words, so that she took the initiative to take action and fooled the existence of the outside world. But in the end, the truth could not be concealed. A false idea filled her mind. Even if she was paralyzed for 6 years, she was still sober, even more sober than ever. In the past 2 years, although she tried her best to cover it up, the premonition that the truth would be revealed became stronger. Li, why are you in a daze again? What are you thinking about? Ling Li, dressed in a dragon robe, strode with a smile. On his handsome face, he had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth, exuding high spirit. In these years, he stayed with Su Li, but the love in his heart did not fade away. Instead, it became purer and purer like wine. There was no room for any other woman in his eyes. Su Li raised her head. At this moment, suddenly, boom! There was a loud explosion in the sky, as if bombarding on everyone's mind. Then Su Li felt a heat on her wrist, and the life ring, which had been lurking and motionless, lit up. She raised her head and saw Ling Li, who was full of astonishment, quickly faded away. She also heard the majestic words, "The time is up. The trial is over. Come out." As soon as the voice fell, Su Li felt that the memory in her mind began to fade. The misery of the first life and the glory of the second life disappeared one after another. Su Li pursed her lips. Even if I have worked hard for 6 years, my memory will disappear after I go out. It seems that I will continue to be a slaughtered animal? While talking to herself, she laughed in a low voice. After all, it's just an illusion. After all, I still can't escape the old way of being used. So, it's not a bad thing to break the life ring in advance and put myself in a desperate situation. Su Li raised her head and stared at the sky, as if she was looking at the unknown existence again. I have seen enough. Crash! The sky suddenly broke. Chapter 533. 34 Chinese Net. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Even though the Hall of the Holy Girl had not been opened for nearly 1,000 years, the air was still not dull and exuded a faint fragrance. In the large quiet room, Su Li opened her eyes and looked down at the familiar white dress. The reincarnation mirror lay quietly in her hand, which was cold to the touch. Because of the role of the life ring, her memory should go back to before she entered the reincarnation mirror. But there seemed to be some accident, and her soul hidden in the depths was still very sober. Although the illusion of Chuangxing Path is very real, it can't affect me. Su Li looked at the details of the reincarnation mirror in her hand, which was the same as in her memory, that is to say, The dangerous test for me is actually too simple. Suddenly, the door of the hall of the holy girl was pushed open on both sides, and a weak figure hurried in. There was anxiety in the gentle female voice. Suli raised her head and saw a pair of eyes full of worry and distress. She was pleasantly surprised, and her face became gentle. She called softly, "Master." "Li!" Imo-chin shouted with pity. She came to kneel down and buried Suli in her chest. Her voice was choked with sobs. "It's over. Everything is over. As your master, I'm sorry." Suli leaned quietly in the arms of the woman, and her eyes were gentle. She sighed softly. "Master, I also want to spend more time with you, but there is not enough time." "Li, what are you talking about?" Imo-chin was stunned and held Suli's face. "Those strong enemies no longer force us." "What do you mean there is not enough time? Are you hurt? Let me see." Imo-chin's face changed slightly, and she became anxious, but was pushed away by Suli. "Everything you demonstrate now is just what I want to see, so all you can do is steal the picture in my memory and outline a false picture. It's too low level." Suli's words were sarcastic, but Imo-chin was more and more confused, and her tone became more anxious and worried. "You little girl, what nonsense are you talking about? Everything is true. You have come out of the suffering reincarnation mirror. You are now the Yushu holy girl. You are the first senior of the young generation of Yushu sect. It doesn't matter if you want to continue lying to me." Suli smiled slightly. "Since the foundation of this world is my belief, then I only need to deceive myself." She stretched out her hand and pointed to Imo-chin's stunned face. "Imo-chin, there are countless spies in Jeojo region. You have been lurking around me and observing me. Which holy sect are you from?" Imo-chin was stunned. Suli increased the suspicion in her heart and narrowed her eyes. "Let me think about it. Those who can be with me must be at least one of the 4 holy sects, right?" Coupled with the fact that he was a lackey of the Fate ancestor, it would be even easier to screen. "Do I need to explain?" "My dear master." Imo-chin took a few steps back, and her face kept changing. Finally, she was completely gloomy and sighed. "Suli, isn't it good to live a muddled life? If it's what you want, then it's not good." Suli smiled brightly, with bright eyes and white teeth. "Holy sects, Fate ancestor, all of you deserve to die." Buzz, the picture in front of her fluctuated for a moment and then returned to stability. Imo-chin's face became cold. Self-consciousness awakened again? How troublesome. Looks like I can only brainwash them again. She reached out to grab Suli. Her cultivation was far beyond that of ordinary practitioners in Jindan realm. Suli tilted her head and smiled, whispering, "Now I am the strongest in Qingshui circle." Boom! Imo-chin mixed with the fragments of the main hall and shot backward, smashing a large group of palaces. Yushu sect was in chaos in an instant. Fragments. Suli flashed out of the fragments of the palace. Looking at the chaotic picture, her smile became more and more intense. "If I think it really exists, then it is true. Now my cultivation can only be resisted by Fate ancestor. I slaughtered the 25 sects in Jeojo region, including the immortal cultivation sect. I killed all the holy sects in Qingshui circle, and blood flowed like a river. Lives were plunged into misery and suffering. Even the 4 peak holy sects were no match for me. Now, Xinglu, you evolve a Fate ancestor for me. Let me see what kind of monster the Fate ancestor is." As Suli finished her words, the picture turned faster and faster. In the end, it finally couldn't keep up with the speed of Suli's weaving and turned into chaos. "Enough, stop." The deafening majestic voice bombarded Suli's mind. Immediately, the chaos in front of her receded and turned into clarity. What entered his eyes was a familiar starry sky, as well as a graceful pink-clothed woman with a blurry face sitting on a throne. Suli looked over. The corner of the lips under the veil of the glamorous woman seemed to move a little, and the voice sounded again. To be able to pass my test at such a young age. You not bad. What's your name? Junior is just a nobody. My name is not worth mentioning. Senior is too kind. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The term Star Hall flashed in her memory. She didn't forget the last encounter in Star Hall. The admiration in the cold and elegant woman's eyes became more and more intense. In order to annoy her sworn enemy Yi Chushue, she casually arranged a killing trap for Su Li. Unexpectedly, she not only failed to kill the girl, but also let her get out of trouble in just 6 years, which really surprised her. Because of this, she took the test token from her subordinates and came to Star Path to see Su Li in person. Yi Chushue appreciated this girl, and it was not without reason. No wonder she took action personally last time. However, this time I robbed her. The cold and elegant woman narrowed her eyes and thought. She deliberately omitted the danger of the test and said in a rare gentle tone, "Are you willing to be my disciple?" Su Li showed a puzzled look in time. Senior is? The cold and elegant woman chuckled softly. Do you still remember the danger you encountered in Star Hall last time? If I didn't help you, you wouldn't be able to get to the present so easily. Su Li suddenly realized and said in surprise, "It turns out to be Senior Star Hall." She deliberately flattered, but her heart was cold. Although the last contact with the woman from Star Hall was extremely short, she was definitely not the same person as the cold and elegant woman she saw today. This woman would never expect that the woman from Star Hall not only saved her last time, but also answered her questions and had a short communication. This person pretended to be that female senior. Is it because she likes me and wants to take me as her disciple in advance? Su Li's thoughts flashed, but she had a premonition that it was absolutely not like this. The test of Star Path didn't leave a way out at all. If she hadn't been strangely able to keep sober all the time, she would definitely be lost in it. But even if she could keep the advantage, it still took her 6 years to break through. This person is malicious. Su Li's eyes were slightly fixed, but she didn't show it on the surface. She said respectfully, "Senior, can you answer my doubts? What is Star Hall? Last time I had a glimpse of it, it really made me confused. What's so difficult about it?" The cold and elegant woman saw that Su Li didn't seem to notice the trick at all. When she thought of the future when she met Yi Chushue, she felt a burst of joy in her heart. She said directly, "As long as you take me as your disciple, one day you will find that the so-called Qingshui Circle is just a backwater place. There are many ignorant people." Su Li had been in contact with Chimo Circle, so she naturally knew the truth that there was always someone better than her. But she still pretended to be shocked and didn't understand anything to attract the cold and elegant woman to continue talking. Star Hall is a big force in the starry sky. It is above many cultivation worlds. You should know that the starry sky and eternity are the ultimate pursuit of practitioners. You are like a frog at the bottom of a well, only in a small world. How dare you call yourself a practitioner? The cold and elegant woman snorted coldly, and her tone became gentle again. So, if you take me as your disciple, you will reach the sky in one step and enter the big force in the starry sky. From then on, you will get rid of the low-level struggle and have the qualification to strive for a higher goal. Why not? Senior, you are right. Su Li's eyes were full of excitement and yearning. I am willing to take you as my teacher. Ha 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 ha. When the cold and elegant woman heard this, she finally couldn't help laughing out loud. Good. Little girl, congratulations on making the best choice in your life. After that, she made a gesture, and a palm-sized jade box appeared from the starry sky and flew into Su Li's hand. This is the elixir and mental method I prepared for you. Due to the rules of the Star Path, I can't give you too much, but these are enough for you to practice to the realm of human immortals. When you step into the realm of human immortals, you can break the nothingness and pinch this method. I will only send someone to pick you up. Suli took the jade box with both hands and lowered her head. Her voice was full of surprise and joy. I will follow your instructions, master. Haha, very good. I look forward to your arrival. The cold and elegant woman waved her sleeves and disappeared in the star path. Soon after, the star gate appeared. Suli took a deep look at the direction where the cold and elegant woman disappeared, and the expression on her face instantly disappeared. She put away the jade box and stepped into the star gate without stopping. Deep in the ground, the star gate flashed, and Suli's figure reappeared. Black Lotus Ring, who had completely given up hope, suddenly quivered and shot out of the soil, falling into Suli's hand. Suli, you are still alive. Do you know how long it has been? 6 years. A whole 6 years. I almost went to find the next master. Suli frowned and pressed Black Lotus back into the ring space. She said coldly, don't talk nonsense. Is there any accident in the arrangement of Jojo region? Black Lotus calmed down a little, and felt that the force above his head was less. He came out and shook his head. For a practitioner, 6 years is nothing. Fortunately, you didn't mention the time of practicing in isolation. Everything in an sect is normal. Suli breathed a sigh of relief and immediately told Black Lotus about her encounter on the Chuangxing path. Black Lotus was instantly stunned. This. There really is a star hall. You knew it last time, but you didn't tell me? Black Lotus was very sad and indignant. He was silent for a moment and said, however, I always feel something is wrong. Do you really want to learn the practice method of the Star Hall? Just for a while. Suli sealed the jade box and put it into the universe ring. She said with a faint smile, how can I practice something of unknown origin? Chapter 534. In the vast and borderless beautiful mountains and rivers, there was only a pink palace dotted among them. In the huge hall, the pink gauze curtain fluttered in the wind, and the smooth and clean ground was like a mirror, reflecting another world. On a soft chair covered with pure white fur, a woman in a pink gauze dress was lying lazily. Her eyes were half closed, and her breasts were half exposed. She was humming softly, and she was in a very good mood. At her feet, a handsome young man in a pink robe was carefully massaging her toes with a focused look. After a while, he raised his eyes and said in a serious tone, Master, do you really want to accept that ignorant female practitioner from the small world as an apprentice? The woman half opened her eyes, and there seemed to be a pink mist rippling in her eyes. In the eyes of the pink-robed young man, it became a soul-stirring beauty. She snorted softly and said with a smile, How could I like that little girl? She is the person that Yi Chushua likes. I'm disgusted. The sense of crisis in the eyes of the pink-robed young man faded away, and he smiled a little more. Then he asked in confusion, Then you clearly gave her the mental method elixir? Who said that was the mental method elixir? The woman's tone turned cold. That's just a trick I left. If that little girl really has the ability to come to me, I'm afraid that she has become half a puppet of mine unknowingly. If I ask her to die, she won't even blink. At that time, I must humiliate Yi Chushua once. Speaking of this, the woman smiled again. That scene, just thinking about it makes me happy. The pink-robed young man also laughed when he heard the words, Master, no matter how angry Yi Chushua is, she will definitely not dare to do it. The woman snorted proudly, Of course, this is my bedroom. Even if she was promoted by Master Hong Luo and became the deputy hall master, the rules of the Star Hall still have to be followed. Before she finished her words, her face suddenly changed. Boom! Without warning, a sword light brighter than the starlight fell into the center of the pink palace like a meteorite. Accompanied by the screams of many male servants, the pink palace's restriction runes didn't stop it even for a moment. In the blink of an eye, It became a ruin under the impact of the sword light. The arc-shaped shock wave spread, the wind raged in the mountains and forests, and countless trees collapsed. One sword destroyed the palace. A figure flashed, and the woman in white suddenly appeared in the void. She held a sword in one hand and slowly descended. Her blue eyes were like ice that could not be melted. Shin Chunshue, get out here! Whoosh! The pink figure instantly shot out from the ruins, followed by the huge pink skull behind her. In the blink of an eye, the sky was illuminated pink. You destroyed my palace and killed my concubine. First, Snow. I'll tear you to shreds. Yi Chushue's blue eyes with sword light suddenly become serious. She doesn't step back but uses her sword to block. The skeleton magic weapon and the flying sword have collided for thousands of times in the blink of an eye. The shock wave brought by the collision soon sweeps away the beautiful mountains and rivers into bare barren hills. Shin Chunshue became more and more anxious. He spread his fingers and a pink skeleton zither appeared out of thin air. Seeing this, Yi Chushue frowned. She let go of the sword in her hand and let it return to her body automatically. Another icy giant sword slowly rose from behind. Shin Chunshue, you hurt my concubine, and I destroyed your palace. Now we are even. Yi Chushue's tone was calm, without the tension before the war. You have to think about the consequences of using the forbidden weapon in the Star Hall. Shin Chunshue's pink eyes were full of anger and madness. Yi Chushue, only you are allowed to disturb my meditation, but I am not allowed to hurt you. There is no such rule in this world. She flicked her 2 fingers, and the skeleton zither in her hand made a series of strange sounds. Even if I am punished to go to the small world, I will seriously injure you today. 10,000 years. You are so stubborn. Yi Chushue shook her head. The giant sword behind her was shining with blue light. There was pity in her eyes. Even if the grade of your forbidden weapon is higher than mine, it depends on who uses it. Shin Chunshue was poked at his sore point, and he was almost crazy with anger. Yi Chushue, I will tear your mouth. She pressed her 10 fingers on the strings of the zither, and flicked her fingers. The skull at the top immediately opened its mouth, protruding countless colorful arcs. Just looking at it would make people sink into it and be disturbed by countless inner demons and distracting thoughts. As the attack approached, Yi Chushue closed her eyes and suddenly opened them. 2 transparent sword lights slashed through in an instant, cutting off more than half of those silk threads in the blink of an eye. Qing Ming Sky. She shouted softly, and the wind and clouds in the sky changed. The starry sky became a world full of small ice-blue swords. Almost at the same time, Shin Chunshue gnashed his teeth angrily. 3,000 pink swords. Countless skeletons flooded over, resisting the encirclement of the small ice-blue swords, occupying half of the sky. Kill them! The skeletons turned into residual shadows and rushed over. They opened their mouths ferociously and bit the small swords one by one. Yi Chushue's eyes flashed, and thousands of small swords also turned into sword lights and shot out. Just the 2 of them actually fought with the intensity of tens of thousands of people. The aftermath of the continuous sweeping in the void thinned the foundation again, and finally, boom! The ground sank and the sky fell and the earth cracked. Shin Chunshue and Yi Chushue were both deputy lords of the Star Hall. Neither of them could do anything to the other. The battle didn't last long. Finally, a lord came out of isolation and forced a stop. But the storm spread for a long time before it stopped. Until Shin Chunshue was sent to guard the Dingfeng Star Zone and Yi Chushue returned to the Star Hall area, no one mentioned it again. In the end, Sister Hong Luo has won this game of chess. Yi Chushue returned to her own bedroom. Seeing the red figure in the spiritual realm, her tense expression suddenly relaxed. The beautiful figure in the spiritual realm let out a faint smile, but did not turn around. Fortunately, you got the test token this time. Proves that you first contacted the junior in the small world, so you won slightly. Shin Chunshu A is temporarily exiled. You can concentrate on improving your strength. Don't be careless. Beichen's people will not give up. I understand. Yi Chushua nodded and sighed. It's a pity that the junior was implicated by me. With Shen Chuanshui's mind, he must have left some means. I hope she can be blessed. The beautiful figure in the mirror was silent for a moment and said, There are so many small worlds. You only have a mark of the star path. If you want to find that girl in a short time, even I can't do it. This matter can only depend on her own luck. We can't help her. Yi Chushua understood this, and couldn't help but sigh again. After Su Li came out of isolation, she returned to an I sect to meet Hua Yen and others, and then she isolated again. This time, the isolation only lasted for 3 days. 3 days later, Su Li sat in the quiet room and looked inside her pubic region. On the 18th grade Black Lotus, Su Li sat in it in the shape of a baby. She looked solemn, but under the black wrapping, she looked a bit evil. Yuanying realm. This is a realm that I didn't reach in my last life. Su Li saw the gurgling power of Yuanying in her body, with the unique jade-like feeling of Sueyu tactic. The gray film buried under the surface of the skin seemed to have thickened to the thickness of a hair. The total amount had increased, and the area that could be covered was also larger. How much strength can the new gray film make me exert without being discovered by the natural law needs new experiments. Coincidentally, Su Bai hasn't eaten for a long time. My physical body hasn't changed. It seems that my realm is low. The breakthrough of the immortal realm has no effect on my physical body. The evil ghost has a new change, which is related to the Black Lotus. I still need to explore it. All kinds of thoughts flashed in her mind, and Su Li got up and opened the door. Hua Yen, Yen Zai, LVU, Dongfang Wushu and others were all there. Su Li slightly tilted her chin, showing a bright smile. Everyone, let's go. After this, Jiuzhou region will be our world. The blue stone was covered with thick moss, which was slippery when walking on it. Her nose was full of the smell of wet grass. Su Li looked up and saw the familiar mountain gate. She raised her lips and stepped up. The plan had been made 10 years ago. In the past 10 years, she just gathered everyone's efforts to improve the framework. When it was finally implemented, she was very idle. The first step was to launch all the secret forces and temporarily pinch the eyes of all the holy sections. The spies of the holy sects had long been transparent in the eyes of the lords. In the past, they just didn't touch them for the sake of the face of the holy sections. Now they had a new master, who was absolutely powerful and overbearing. Naturally, they had to obey the master's orders. After the first step, the 23 sects used all the secret forces to infiltrate into Zihan sect and Yushu sect at the same time, and temporarily controlled all the people who were suspected to be the spies of the holy sects. After 2 steps, the 23 sects had a short blank period. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 23 sects, which had been prepared for a long time, were divided into 2 groups and attacked the 2 sects at the same time. The Immortal Cultivation sect divided the ghosts into 2 groups, and each group went to help the 2 sects. Many ants could bite an elephant to death. A sect faced the old guys of 12 sects at the same time. Even if it had a deep foundation, it couldn't bear it at all, not to mention the existence of ghosts, which was incomprehensible to practitioners. Therefore, the 2 sects were stunned by the sudden invasion. They only held on for 2 days, and were on the verge of being breached. What's going on? Who can tell me why the 23 sects attacked our Yushu sect and Zihan sect at the same time? In the last line of defense, the eyes of Yao Shuangya, the current lord of Yushu sect, were red, and most of his soft black hair turned white in 2 nights. The atmosphere in the whole hall was tense, like a string that was about to break. It's not a big deal if a strong enemy attacks. Our Yushu sect has prepared for a rainy day and prepared a lot of records. But every time we counterattack, the rout is calculated, and we are completely annihilated. The sect is so shaky. Who is adding insult to injury? Who is the mole? The whole hall was silent. Many elders looked at each other, and they were all at a loss. They were elders who had stayed in Yushu sect for more than 1,000 years. How could they be the mole? Lord, the people in the sect are shaken now. It's not the time to talk about this. Lihai, the deputy lord, stood up and said. Yao Shuangya took a deep breath and barely calmed down. You are right. We should be more united in the face of the enemy. But the 12 sects joined forces, and the old ancestor was seriously injured. The spies we sent to seek help from the holy sects have no news. What should we do now? Everyone's heart sank and they fell into a long silence. Maybe we can make a deal with the immortal tea tree to unlock its seal. Someone suggested, and then the hall fell into a longer silence. The demon tree looked kind on the surface, but it was actually sealed here by the founder. If the seal was really unlocked, no one knew if the demon tree would turn against them and turn to deal with them. Emo Chin stood among many elders of alchemy, but there was not much sadness in her heart. Maybe this is retribution, she thought in her heart. Chapter 535. At this point, we have no choice. Lihai looked dignified. He looked at Yao Shuangya and said solemnly, Lord, we can't resist the joint forces of the 12 sections. We can only rely on external forces. If we don't use the trump card of Immortal Tea Plant, you are the only one left to wake up Grand Elder. Impossible! Yao Shuangya interrupted Lihai's words with a gloomy look. Grand Elder is at a critical moment, which is related to the rise of our sect. We must not disturb him. As soon as these words came out, many elders were worried at the same time. What should we do? The elder in charge of the supply of spiritual stones looked worried. Even if the tactical matrix for protecting the sect shrinks to the extreme, it can only last for half a day. Can we only surrender? Yao Shuangya saw that people were unstable. Even if his heart was as heavy as a mountain, he still looked calm and his tone was steady. Our Yushu sect has stood for thousands of years. How can it be defeated by a group of mobs? The war is inevitable. You wait to recuperate first. At that time, I will have a way to deal with the combat power of Grand Elder. Hearing Yao Shuangya's words, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and said in unison, Lord is wise. However, no one knew how many people actually believed it. I'll take someone to check the tactical matrix. Lihai's eyes flashed and he retreated. Deputy Lord Li, wait. I'll go with you. The elder in charge of the supply of spiritual stones hurriedly followed him out of the hall. Seeing this, the lord looked slightly relaxed. At the critical moment, there were still people in the sect who could be relied on. However, when he thought of Grand Elder, his mood was gloomy again. Over the years, others didn't know why Yushu sect was strong, but he knew it as the Lord. Grand Elder had disappeared as early as more than 2,000 years ago. If he hadn't climbed up the holy sects in time, Yushu sect would have been swallowed by Zihan sect. How could it still maintain prosperity? All the spies of the holy sects have been removed, and even the elder in charge of contacting the holy sects has disappeared. Who on earth is so generous? Yao Shuangya calculated. Facing the unknown enemy, he felt more and more powerless. Unconsciously, he came to a palace. Looking up at the words, Holy Girl Hall, he felt inexplicably cold. Bad luck, Yao Shuangya's face darkened. He waved his sleeves, turned around, and left. This scene clearly fell into the eyes of Fong Ling, who was sitting upright in the hall, her expression as usual. After the chaos 1,000 years ago, the position of the holy girl of Yushu sect had long been regarded as a jinx. If it were not for the order of holy sects that the holy girl was required to preside over the necessary rituals, the position of the holy girl would have been revoked long ago. After she came back from that world, although she took over senior sister apprentice May's class, she was also suspected of being a soul snatcher, so she was always guarded against by the Master and the Lord. This situation became more obvious after she saved Mei Ruhan. However, she didn't care. Atonement, there might be another way now. Fong Ling whispered to herself. She took out an old embroidery from her arms, which was almost falling apart. There were 2 characters, leanly on it. She could still remember that carefree self of hers. That kind of simple busyness was a kind of warmth and happiness that she had never experienced before. How great would it be if everything in that world was real? Fong Ling sighed and closed her eyes. She didn't have much time to rest. Yao Shuangyao walked out of the main hall and looked up at the huge and endless spiritual power impact outside the seemingly indestructible tactical matrix for protecting the sect. He quickly withdrew his gaze and turned to walk into the back mountain. In front of an ancient palace, he stopped and pondered for a moment. He called softly, "Old ancestor?" The palace was silent for a moment, and there was an old cough. "Ahem. Come in." Yao Shuangya didn't expect that the old ancestor would really respond to him. He was slightly happy at the moment and pushed the door into the hall. The curtains on all sides of the palace were closed, and only a few spiritual lamps lit up a few areas. The sight suddenly dimmed. Yao Shuangya came to the quiet room where the old ancestor usually practiced in isolation. Seeing the door open, he immediately walked in. The old ancestor, who usually had white hair and a ruddy face, now had a wrinkled face and a thin figure. There was a little blood on the chest of his snow-white robe, like plum blossoms. Yao Shuangya thought that his injury should be better after the old ancestor called him in, but he didn't expect it to be more serious. He was shocked immediately. "Old ancestor, you? Ahem. I'm not dead yet. What are you shouting for?" Immortal Yushu Ding Yan's eyes were gloomy, and he couldn't help but cover his mouth and cough twice. The cultivation of the old ancestors of the 12 sects is a little lower than mine. But I'm not weaker than them. I just hate the weird ghost that greatly reduces my strength. Otherwise, how can I be like this? I'm afraid that's the means of the person in the dark. Yao Shuangya's tone was a little weak. It's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. Whoever thought that there would be someone who could unify the power of the 23 sects? The enemy is aggressive and well-prepared. How should we deal with it? You and I both know that Grand Elder is not in the sect. Ding Yan paused, and his voice was low. The name of Immortal Yushu is passed on to me. Yushu's sect must not be destroyed in my hands. You come with me to see the demon tree Bizhui. Do we really need to rely on the old monster Bizhui? Yao Shuangya was shocked, but he didn't say anything. He obediently flew out of the palace with Ding Yan and landed in front of the demon tree of Tea Tree Mount. In the process of flying, Ding Yan's dry face quickly filled up and changed to the original childish appearance. His sluggish pneuma also temporarily recovered, but the blood on his chest was not erased. Yao Shuangya breathed a sigh of relief. The old ancestor is not confused. He is still guarding against Bizhui. Senior Bizhui, please show up. Ding Yan spoke with full of vigor, and his voice spread far between the cliffs. Boom! The giant tree swayed, and soon Bizhui's old face appeared on the thick roots. It turns out to be Ding Yan. After you took over the title of Immortal Yushu, you have never looked for me. Why are you here today? Although Bizhui was being sarcastic, his tone was not bad. Ding Yan was slightly relieved and said in a deep voice, "Senior, are you willing to make a deal with me?" Bizhui let out a faint smile. "Let's hear it." Ding Yan held his fists and said in a low voice, "Yushu's sect is about to be destroyed. Senior, it's impossible that you don't know it. After the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect is broken, you will be trapped here. I'm afraid it's hard to protect yourself, right?" Hee hee. Bizhui's tone turned cold. Your Yushu sect knows why I am trapped. Why do you come here to laugh at me? Senior, you misunderstood me. Ding Yan's attitude was extremely humble as he hurriedly explained, I came here this time to help Senior undo the seal. Ha 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 ha. Bizhui laughed. There is no free lunch in the world. Ding Yan, do you want me to fight for your sect? That's impossible. Even if I am trapped here, I will never help you deal with the enemy. Yao Shuangyao was shocked and angry, but Ding Yan was not surprised at all. He continued to lower his posture. Senior, the 12 sects have joined hands. Even if you are willing to help, it will be useless. I want you to help me conveniently. There will be no danger. A trace of interest appeared on Bizhui's old face. What? You want us to escape? Emochin was called to the side hall alone and looked at Li Hai, who came to deliver the message. How can we escape? Aren't we trapped in the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect? It's the demonic tree. Li Hai's voice was as calm as ever. Old Ancestor made an agreement with Bizhui to set him free. Bizhui will evacuate with the elites of the sect and go to other big regions to start anew. I see. Emochin smiled bitterly. It was really Ding Yan's usual style. Suddenly, she remembered one thing. Seeing that Li Hai had not left, she quickly asked, How many people is he going to take away? Li Hai looked at Emochin and did not speak. Emochin's heart was cold. Xiaoliang and Shaochen. Bei Xiaoliang is now the first genius of the younger generation of our sect. Naturally, he will not be abandoned. It is Qi Chen who will be abandoned. Li Hai said regretfully, The demonic tree is only willing to take away 100 people. If we start anew, we must have an alchemist. Old Ancestor doesn't even want to take you. How come? Emochin fell to the ground in a daze. She had already abandoned a disciple. Now she wanted her to abandon the second one? Li Hai stood in place and did not leave. After a long time, Emochin suddenly raised her head, stared at the person in front of her, and slowly said 2 words. Li Hai. There was a smile on Li Hai's cold face. Perhaps because he hadn't smiled for a long time, his smile was extremely ugly. You haven't called my name for a long time. Emochin shook her head. I know my level of alchemy. In terms of importance, it is not enough to enter the top 100 of the sect. Did you say something to Yao Shuangya? Being exposed, Li Hai was silent for a while and said, I don't want you to die. Emochin smiled in a low voice, raised her head, and her eyes seemed to light up. Take Qi Chen with you, I will stay. Li Hai was immediately shocked. You should be able to understand me. Emochin walked to Li Hai, and her tone was as calm as death. You know better than anyone how I have lived in the past 1,000 years. I want to go down to accompany her. Emochin's eyes softened. That girl must be very lonely down there alone. That's not your fault. Li Hai's eyes flashed with pain. None of us can save her, do you understand? So, I was wrong from the beginning. The better I treat her, the more I hurt her. Emochin closed her eyes. Don't worry about me anymore, Deputy Lordly. Whoosh! Li Hai pointed at Emochin's sleeping acupuncture point. Looking at the person who fell softly in his arms, his cold eyebrows frowned together, and then became flat after a while. What? You want to stay? Yao Shuangya looked at the cold man in front of him in amazement. Li Hai, this is not like you. In his impression, Li Hai never did anything without benefits, let alone self-sacrifice. Did he take the wrong medicine this time? There must be someone to sacrifice. If there is no high-level person to stay, the sect will fall apart too fast. I'm afraid that you won't even have time to escape. Li Hai's voice was dull, as if he was not sacrificed in his words. Yao Shuangya's face changed slightly when he heard the words, and then he felt a sense of sympathy. You can always convince me easily. If it weren't for this disaster, maybe the next Lord of Yushu sect would be you. It's useless to say more. You should get ready quickly. Qi Chen will take my place. He is a good seedling. Okay. Yao Shuangya didn't think much, and quickly left to cooperate with Bizhui. Everything was done in secret. Li Hai looked back and saw thousands of ignorant disciples who were still maintaining the operation of the tactical matrix distributed among the mountains, and his eyes flashed with self-mockery. I still lost to you, Qin. Chapter 536. On the verge of extinction, Yushu Sec's efficiency was extremely high. After deciding on the seed candidates, only an hour later, everyone was summoned to a dim hall. Ahem! Ding Yen opened his eyes and looked at Li Hai. Although his pupils were old and turbid, they seemed to be able to see through everything. Then, his old voice sounded from the latter's awareness sea. Compared with Yao Shuangya, I appreciate you more. Do you really want to stay for a woman? Li Hai tightened his arms around Qin, pursed his lips, and did not respond. Forget it. The appreciation in Ding Yan's eyes faded and was replaced by indifference. You should go out. Li Hai bowed his head and gestured, handing the unconscious person in his hand to Beishao Liang and Qi Chen, who were standing not far away. He secretly transmitted the sound, "Without me in the future, take care of your master. Don't let me down." Deputy Lordly. Qi Chen took over the master and called out in a bitter voice, but his voice was stuck in his throat. In such a desperate situation, even the old ancestor could only choose to escape. He wanted Li Hai to stay, but there was no way at all. Should it be so painful to be weak? Deputy Lordly, you stay, I'll go out. Beishao Liang's eyes were firm. Li Hai smiled, and his smile was as ugly as ever. Your master has lost your senior sister apprentice. I can't let her lose any more disciples. Live well, do you understand? Beishao Liang lowered his head, didn't let himself look so embarrassed, and said softly, Without you, master will be sad. Li Hai's whole body shook slightly, and then his smile became brilliant. That's the best sentence I've ever heard. After that, he patted Beishao Liang's shoulder, and without stopping, he decisively turned and disappeared at the door of the hall. Beishao Liang was startled and looked up suddenly, but he didn't see his back. His eyes suddenly dimmed, and his heart was drowned by the surging guilt and powerlessness. He always understood that his master was an alchemist with mediocre combat power. Without Li Hai's secret help, it was impossible for him to become so excellent. For him, what was the difference between Li Hai's status and that of his master? But now Beishao Liang's mind was in a mess, and he was silent. The hall was similarly terrifyingly quiet. The feeling of being forced to leave one's home was unpleasant to anyone. Even those who were naturally cold and indifferent couldn't help but reveal their displeasure. Ahem. You are all elites carefully selected by me. The important task of reinvigorating Yushu sect will be handed over to you. Don't let me down. Li Hai covered his mouth. His face was abnormally red. He waved his hand and sent out a message. In the next moment, a jade-green vortex appeared out of thin air at the center of the hall. Shockingly, it was the teleportation entrance of the immortal Tao tea tree. Time is running out. Let's all go in. We will leave the Jojo region with the immortal tea plant. After we get out of the region, it depends on our own luck. After Ding Yen finished his words, Yao Shuangya immediately took the lead to enter the green whirlpool, and the elders who followed Yao Shuangya entered one after another. With them taking the lead, the rest of the people no longer hesitated and all entered the whirlpool. Beishao Liang carried the unconscious Qin on his back, looked at Qi Chen, and also stepped in. After everyone entered, Ding Yen also stepped into the whirlpool. At the same time, he unlocked the last restriction on the immortal tea tree. Bizhui, it's time for you to keep your promise. Boom! While the earth was shaking, the remaining disciples of Yushu sect were shocked to find that the entire tea tree peak suddenly collapsed and completely disappeared. Calm down. Li Hai's face was gloomy. Continue to defend the big tactical matrix. If the big tactical matrix is destroyed, everyone will die. Shurqiu, the elder in charge of the supply of spiritual stones, looked sad, and distributed the few remaining spiritual stones in a daze. He was one of the insiders, but what could he do? If the truth was announced now, it would not help, and it would only make them die faster. Outside the big mountain-protecting tactical matrix, the flowing light was overflowing. Tens of thousands of practitioners gathered from the 12 sects crowded the top of the mountain. They joined into 12 offensive tactical matrices to bombard the big mountain-protecting tactical matrix, but there was still a considerable part of energy accumulated, ready to be released. The practitioners above Jindan realm of the 12 sects densely occupied the sky of the entire Yushu sect. In the center of everyone, Yen Zai looked at the Yushu sect's big tactical matrix, which had become as thin as a piece of paper. He was silent, as if waiting for something. Suddenly, a flowing light passed through the nothingness. He immediately grabbed it and scanned it with his divine awareness. Then his eyes brightened, and he raised his head and shouted coldly, "Everyone, attack with all your strength!" Boom, 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 boom. The 12 offensive tactical matrices lit up with dazzling light almost at the same time. In the horrified eyes of the disciples of Yushu sect, the light converged into a terrifying energy waterfall and suddenly bombarded the same point of the big mountain-protecting tactical matrix. Clatter! The harsh sound resounded through the sky, and many disciples who maintained the tactical matrix vomited blood. They looked up at the big mountain-protecting tactical matrix, which was broken with a big hole. The big tactical matrix is broken. Swish! Yen Zai's figure flashed, and the flying sword behind him also flew out, pointing at the main hall of Yushu sect. Capture Li Hai and the holy girl Fong Ling alive. If the ordinary disciples resist, kill them. If they surrender, don't kill them. If they surrender, don't kill them. If they surrender, don't kill them. Rush! The practitioners of the 12 sects rushed to the top of the mountain of Yushu sect like a flood, and there were sounds of killing. For a time, blood flowed like a river. In the face of the elites of the 12 sects, the Battle of Yushu sect was simply a one-sided massacre. All the disciples of Yushu sect were desperate. I surrender! Someone dropped the flying sword in his hand and held his head with both hands. After seeing this, the coalition of the 12 sects only stunned rather than killed him, and then continued to kill the next disciple of Yushu sect. When others saw this, they immediately had hope and surrendered one after another. I'm just an elder responsible for the supply of spiritual stones. I surrender. When Shurqiu saw Yen Zai coming with people, he immediately held his head with both hands in panic and shouted in embarrassment. Yen Zai raised his eyebrows and knocked Shurqiu out with the back of the sword. Then the flying sword turned and suddenly attacked another long-faced elder. Wait! I surrender too! As soon as the long-faced elder spoke, the flying sword pierced through his chest and brought out a Yuanying. Why? The long-faced elder vomited blood, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. Yen Zai summoned the flying sword expressionlessly, and sarcasm flashed in his eyes. Not everyone can get Mr. Li's special pardon. The sun set and the moon rose. 6 hours passed in a blink of an eye. The cold moonlight shone on the blood-red mountain gate, which looked a little gloomy and terrifying. Cough, cough. Li Hai coughed up 2 mouthfuls of blood and sat on the ground powerlessly. His cultivation was sealed, and his injury was serious. He couldn't even stand up. Behind him, there were Fong Ling, Shurqiu, and others. Their cultivation was also sealed, and they were like fish on the chopping block. Why don't you kill me? He looked up and stared at Yen Zai, who was surrounded by everyone, and asked in a hoarse voice. Was this person the initiator of all this? Unexpectedly, he was not too sad. The new ruler was not bloodthirsty, and almost all ordinary disciples survived. This was the greatest kindness in the war of cultivation. Yanzai turned his head and did not answer him, but transmitted the sound, "Wuxue, how is it?" Dongfang Wuxue quickly responded, "It's almost over. All the 30,000 ordinary disciples of Yushu sect have been incorporated. All the elders have been executed except those named by Mr. Li. No one has been missed." Yanzai smiled, and then received a message from Huayan, "Zihan's sect is also over. Grand Elder Zihan didn't survive 10 moves from one Yuanqing of Immortal Cultivation sect, and he didn't cause any obstruction. We are almost at Yushu sect now." Hearing the 3 words, "one Yuanqing," Yanzai's face turned slightly pale. Fortunately, it was dark at night, so he was not found. Mr. Li really dares to accept anyone. No, it's a ghost, this thought flashed through Yanzai's mind. He put away the distracting thoughts and waved his hand. "Everyone in the 12 sects, except for those who appease the disciples of Yushu sect, everyone will accompany me to meet Mr. Li." Speaking of this, he pointed to Li Hai and others on the ground. "Take these people with you." Mr. Li? Even if she was seriously injured and caught, Fang Ling didn't change at all. Hearing this word, her delicate body suddenly trembled, and she raised her head to try to see Yanzai's face. But Yanzai had turned around and no longer looked at her. Traitor coldness flashed through Yanzai's eyes. Mr. Li had suffered so many grievances, but this woman could still be a holy girl in the sinful place of Yushu sect with a clear conscience. If Mr. Li hadn't specifically told him, he would have killed Fang Ling long ago. "Let's go. The gathering place is the Holy Girl Hall of Yushu sect, which is still well preserved." When Yanzai waved his hand, a group of people rushed to the Holy Girl Hall. Su Yang, who was in front of the team, couldn't help but marvel. The unification of Jiuzhou region would happen tonight. Blockhead, Su Jiuzhou actually did it, and it only took 10 years. Su Mu glanced at him coldly and didn't speak, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Turning the impossible into the possible. Maybe if they followed her, there would be a glimmer of possibility. "Sister," a moment later, everyone stopped outside the Holy Girl Hall and saw that another group of people had arrived. "Sister Huayan." Yanzai greeted them, and he couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. "We succeeded." Huayan nodded with a smile, and her worried heart was finally relieved. Although the road ahead was still difficult, they had conquered a large region, and they were not without foundation. "Go in." Yanzai responded, waved his hand, and entered the Holy Girl Hall with Huayan. The empty hall seemed to be unusually quiet. All the lords of the 33 sects subconsciously lightened their steps, and they were a little nervous. Most of them had not seen the Mr., and the level of contact they had was limited to Yanzai and others. Was the Mr. who unified Jiuzhou region male or female? How great was he? They could get a glimpse of him today. In a few steps, in the fluttering gauze curtain, Fang Ling looked anxiously. Finally, a graceful and thin figure appeared in front of them. A female practitioner. It was a female practitioner. Fang Ling was excited. Was it really her? "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Li. We are late." Yanzai stopped the team, walked to the front, and knelt on one knee. His eyes were full of love and joy. "Fortunately, we didn't fail you. Conquered Jiuzhou region." Chapter 537. You've done well. The throne under Su Li automatically turned around, and her charming face was revealed to the public for the first time. Her slender and white fingertips touched the corner of her eyebrows, and her smile was as pure and beautiful as an orchid in an empty valley. "Mister, you are a wise leader." The sect leaders bowed in unison, unable to conceal the excitement in their eyes. Breaking away from the sage sect's control and unifying the entire region, if it was 10 years ago, They wouldn't even dare to think about it. An I sect, which was composed of 25 sects in Jojo region, definitely had the potential to become a member of holy sects, the ranks of the sage sects, as long as one was a cultivator, who wouldn't rush to join. The so-called winner takes all. It was nothing more than this. Under the expulsion of such a mentality, the lords who joined the NI sect voluntarily or not showed unprecedented enthusiasm at this moment. Of course, all of this was built on the premise that there was someone powerful enough to lead all of them. The aura seems to be the same. Fong Ling looked at Su Li sitting on the white throne absent-mindedly. She couldn't hide the disappointment in her eyes. No matter how similar her temperament was, it still wasn't her. The female cultivator in front of him was far too young. Su Yang pursed his lips. This old monster still liked to act young as usual. I'm Su Jojo. Su Li glanced at everyone present. Her tone was light, but it was full of unspeakable overbearingness and pressure. Now you are the grand elder of an I sect, and in the future, you will be the lord of Jojo region? Do you have any objections? As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere here froze. Yen Zai, who knelt on one knee at the front, had a firm look in his eyes and said loudly, "Mister, you are so talented that you should be the ruler of Jojo region." Seeing this, Hua Yan's eyes flashed. She stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. She shouted, "Greetings, Jojo region lord." LVU, Dongfang Wushu and others knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Jojo region lord." "Greetings, Jojo region lord." Gue Bayan and others who had been taught the soul tactics echoed. Seeing so many people respond, the people of the 23 sects finally let go of the last hesitation in their hearts. They all knelt down and bowed to worship. "Greetings, Jojo region lord." "Greetings, Jojo region lord." "Greetings." For a time, the hall was filled with cheers. The people who were captured alive looked at each other in shock. Even Li Hai, who had no fear in his heart, couldn't help but be shocked. The scene of the change of dynasty in the Jojo region happened in front of him. Everything happened so fast that he felt unreal. However, the faint pain from his body told him that everything was real. Unfortunately, the lord of Yushu sect fled with his people, and their old ancestor is nowhere to be found. In the crowd, Mu Hong couldn't help but say, and her face was full of unwillingness. When she mentioned the topic, the lords of the 12 sects attacking Yushu sect also remembered this omission and spoke one after another. The immortal Dao Ti tree disappeared as well. Old monster Jade Void must have made a deal with the immortal Dao Ti tree. With the immortal Dao Ti tree's escape technique, it should be able to do it without anyone noticing. "Sir, if we don't get rid of these fish that slipped through the net, I'm afraid there will be flaws in our plan," Dong Minglan said worriedly. Ever since she had taken over the Li Yang sect, she, as the vice sect leader, had risen rapidly in just 6 years. She had replaced the original sect leader and become the only person in charge of the Li Yang sect. With the rise of her status, she not only did not underestimate an I sect, but also increasingly felt that this seemingly young lord was unfathomable, so she had always been loyal and devoted to him. "It's fine." Su Li smiled lightly and waved her hand. Hua Yan immediately turned around and smiled at the crowd. "Don't be impatient, everyone. After an hour, you will see the result." As soon as this was said, everyone was stunned, and then their faces changed to different degrees. They were surprised and doubtful. Could it be that Mr. can even stop the immortal Dao Ti tree? That is an old monster that has lived for nearly 10,000 years. Li Hai's calm face became gloomy, and he was faintly uneasy. Was his sacrifice going to be in vain? In the core space of the underground tea tree, the hundreds of people who escaped from Yushu sect gathered everywhere in groups of 3 or 5. Qi Chen and Bei Xiaoliang protected Mo Qin on both sides, both silent. Mo Qin stared blankly at the front of the nothingness. Su Li's voice and smile in the past sometimes flashed in her mind, and sometimes turned into Li Hai's unsmiling face. There had never been a moment when she felt so disgusted. Obviously, she didn't have any ability, but she naively wanted to protect everything. In the end, she harmed everyone. It turns out that I am a scourge. Li Brother Hai, it is me who harmed you, it is me. Emochin's eyes were full of self-reproach. She bowed her head and bit her lips tightly, clutching her heart tightly. Master, Bei Xiao Liang looked at his master's uncomfortable look, and he also felt uncomfortable in his heart. But he was also helpless. All he could do now was to practice hard. Qi Chen took a deep breath and grasped the spiritual stone in his hand. At this moment, he had the same idea as his senior fellow apprentice Bei Xiao Liang. Only by becoming strong enough could he protect Master, could he avenge Master Li Hai. Boom! Suddenly, the entire core space of the tea tree shook violently, and then stopped from running at high speed. What's the matter? Have we arrived at the outer region? Yao Shuangya stood up nervously. Ding Yan beside him was still calm, and he sent a message, Bizhui, do you want to turn against us? Don't forget, only if you send us to the outer region, I will unlock the last seal left in your body. Ding Yan, don't underestimate my ability. A green light group was transmitted into the core space and turned into a clear picture. In the picture, the boundary tablet of Jiuzhou region was clearly visible. Looking at the surrounding desolate landform, it seemed that it was the Dafu region near Jiuzhou region, which was already very far from Yushu sect. What a fast speed! Ding Yan was slightly shocked, but he was more happy to get rid of death. The Dafu region had been destroyed, and few people came here. It was the best place to hide and heal. Great! We escaped. The rest of the people of Yushu sect also showed joy. Even Bei Xiao Liang and Qi Chen were inevitably affected, and their faces showed a trace of relief. But this kind of relief did not last for a breath. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the green core space. Then, an extremely terrifying repulsive force was generated out of thin air. Everyone was caught off guard, and they were all spat out of the space by Bizhui. More than 100 people rolled on the ground. Ahem! Ding Yan stood up awkwardly, looked up and saw thousands of eyes around him, and even saw Li Hai's shocked face. His face suddenly changed. Here is not the extraterritorial area, but Yushu sect. When the rest of the elders saw the scene in front of them, and then heard the roar of the old ancestor, how could they not understand their own situation, and they all showed despair. It's over! How could it be? Bei Xiao Liang gritted his teeth so hard that he almost bit blood. When he saw Li Hai, who was seriously injured and captured in the crowd, the despair and grief in his heart rose to the extreme. Senior fellow apprentice, look, the person sitting at the top. Suddenly, Qi Chen bumped into him and pointed to the throne at the top blankly. Bei Xiao Liang looked back, and suddenly fell into a sluggish state. Emochin did not notice the abnormality of her two apprentices. In her eyes there was only Li Hai covered with blood. She stumbled over. Yan Zai received Su Li's signal and ordered people to make way for her. There was a slight respect in his eyes. Li Hai covered his mouth and coughed violently twice before he said, "You shouldn't come back." Emochin suddenly smiled and gently grabbed Li Hai's cold hands full of blood. "No, I should come back. I figured it out. What happened is irreversible. Since I can't save you, it's better to die together." Suddenly touched by the strange warmth, Li Hai's body stiffened, and then his old face blushed. He said in a muffled voice, "Maybe things are not as bad as you think." He was not a fool. How could he not notice the unusual movements of Yan Zai and others? The people of Enai sect clearly had 100 ways to kill him before, but they just seriously injured him and didn't kill him. Before seeing Yan Zai voluntarily make way for the team, he thought that Enai sect wanted to catch him alive and then kill him as an example to others. But now it seemed that he guessed very wrong. "Bizhui, how dare you lie to me?" Ding Yan's eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at the old man's face in the turquoise vortex in the hall. Hearing Ding Yan's words, Bizhui suddenly laughed in a low voice. Tut tut, the Grand Elder of your Yushu sect deceived me that year. How can I fall into the same trap for the second time? It is more pleasant to cooperate with the Grand Elder of an I sect. The seal in your hand has long been unlocked by the Grand Elder of an I sect. Don't waste your effort. Tut tut, how does it feel to fall from heaven to hell? You. The killing intent in Ding Yan's eyes skyrocketed. Before he made a move, he suddenly felt a very heavy pressure shrouding him, which pressed him to the ground with a bang and couldn't move. Bizhui, you can go now. Su Li's tone was cold, and Bijue's eyes suddenly changed slightly. He disappeared in the hall with the vortex, and his pneuma quickly went away with the wind. Everyone in the hall saw that Bizhui was so afraid of Su Li, and their awe of her deepened again. Perhaps their new master was not inferior to the old monster of holy sections. They just didn't know how such a terrifying figure appeared out of thin air in Jiuzhou region. The name, Su Jiuzhou, was too strange, and it was probably fake. The identity of the new master was too mysterious. Sensing that Bizhui went around outside and returned to the underground of Yushu sect to wait for death, Su Li's eyes returned to gentleness. The 10-year period was coming to an end, and Bizhui would die suddenly in a few days. This was related to the big secret of her body of evil ghost and blood poison. Naturally, it couldn't be exposed. So, she simply made use of the waste and pretended that Bizhui left again. Fortunately, everything went according to plan, and there was no accident. Thinking of this, Su Li looked back at Ding Yan. Looking at the old man who had committed countless sins on her, she smiled and said softly, Immortal Yushu, have you ever thought that you would have such a day? Ding Yan's eyes were full of anger, and he was about to speak. At this moment, the pressure that shrouded his seriously injured body suddenly increased, and his internal organs were deformed due to the pressure. The sharp pain surged, and Ding Yan suddenly blacked out. He spat blood and fainted. Old ancestor! Yao Shuangya knelt beside Ding Yan. His eyes were blank and he was at a loss. He didn't even show any sign of resistance. He was just a puppet of Ding Yan, and he didn't have any ambition of, rather die in glory than live in disgrace. In the crowd, the lord of Zihan's sect, who was captured alive, sighed deeply when he saw this scene. At this point, there was no difference between sects in Jiuzhou region. Chapter 538. After dawn, the sun was covered by thick clouds, and it was drizzling. In Yushu Mountain, a new bamboo building was built under the disappearing T-Peak. It was quiet and elegant in the mountains and rivers. Su Li stood under the eaves, looking quiet and focused. She reached out to take a drop of rain. Her fingertips were cold, as if they could penetrate her heart. Standing behind her, Yanzai didn't understand why this ordinary rain was so beautiful. Master's mind was always hard to guess. After sighing secretly, Yanzai coughed softly and said in a low voice, Master, the 23 sects have brought their people back to their sections. According to what you said, we won't announce that we belong to an I sect first. Su Li came to her senses and nodded gently. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. Even if I control the spies of holy sects, it won't take long for the reputation of an I sect to reach their ears. However, if there is room, I will have time to prepare. Yanzai looked worried. Master, although holy sects don't know your existence, they can't sit back and watch a new holy sect rise. I'm afraid that a hard battle will be inevitable at that time. Su Li smiled when she heard the words, which made Yanzai's state of mind calm down a lot. You come from Void Sword sect, so you know that holy sects in all major regions can never be a piece of iron. Besides, there is the competition for the Tianjiao list, which distracts our attention. Our pressure is not as great as you think. Yanzai nodded in agreement, What you said is very true. This period of time is enough for us to stabilize the internal situation. Even if holy sects come to probe, they can't easily collapse. Yes. Su Li responded. Yen sent a message that the selection of the Tianjiao in other major regions is in full swing. We have to hurry up and participate in those who should participate. Don't let others see the flaws. Speaking of this, her voice paused, and her tone was slightly soft. How are my master and others? Master Mo Qin was placed in the Nuanxin Pavilion with the best healing effect in Yushu sect. She was just frightened, but not seriously injured. But the deputy lord of Liha Yenzai scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "At that time, I was nervous, and I didn't know the relationship between him and Master Mo Qin. I didn't expect that the deputy lord of Yushu sect was so weak." Su Li couldn't help laughing. Perhaps it was because Yen Zai had been by her side for too long that he had almost forgotten that he was once a genius of Glory sect. In the 6 years when she entered the Chuangxing path, Yen Zai had nothing to do. He practiced hard, and with the help of the secret medicine he made, his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. When she came out, she was already at the peak of Huashan realm, half a step away from entering the nature's test period. How could Li Hai, who was only at the early stage of Huashan realm, be his opponent? Go and get busy. In these 10 years, you've crossed 2 realms, from Jindan to deification. Although your foundation is not damaged, your state of mind needs to be accumulated over time. You should settle down and comprehend it before you make a breakthrough. Zai has learned a lot. In the Nuanxin Pavilion, Li Hai suddenly opened his eyes, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. Mo Qin, who was guarding by the side, saw him wake up and immediately asked, Vice Lordly, how is your injury recovering? Does your chest still hurt? Li Hai nodded and said in a muffled voice, If you can call my name again, I can get better faster. Mo Qin blushed and looked slightly annoyed. She got up and walked out. Li Hai immediately followed her when he saw it. Beishao Liang and Qi Chen in the outer hall suddenly smiled. After the disaster of Yushu sect, the relationship between the master and vice lord Li seemed to be frozen. It was a good thing that there was a crack. Senior fellow apprentice, have you heard about the people who escaped with us? What happened to them now? Qi Chen's expression was slightly restrained, and he transmitted the sound in a low voice. Beishao Liang shook his head. I was healing Vice Lordly all morning and didn't go out. What did you hear? Do you remember the ice prison that imprisoned senior sister apprentice May before? Qi Chen's voice was low, and Beishao Liang's face changed slightly. Lord, old ancestor, and holy girl are all locked up there. I heard that there are also the lord and elders of Zihan's sect, Shaochen. What is the origin of this Anai sect? Do you have a clue? Li Hai didn't seem to catch up with Mo Qin. He returned to the house and sat next to Beishao Liang. He frowned slightly. They seem to treat us very well. Except for leaving the sect, they don't restrict our actions at all. They even let me live in the Nuanxin Pavilion to heal. Beishao Liang and Qi Chen looked at each other, and a thin figure appeared in their minds at the same time. The kindness she released to them in the shattered spirit's illusory realm was still clear. If they wanted to know the answer, it seemed that they could only ask him. Beishao Liang was a little lost in thought, and suddenly heard a scream of Mo Qin outside the door. Li Hai's face changed, and he immediately rushed out of the door. Beishao Liang and Qi Chen also followed him. In the courtyard of the Nuanxin Pavilion, Mo Qin stared blankly at Su Li, who suddenly appeared in front of her. She looked down at the empty kettle in her hand, and then saw the water stains on the black gauze clothes of the beautiful woman in front of her, which was dripping down the edge of the clothes. Panic suddenly appeared in her eyes. She was careless for a moment, and even poured the water used to water the flowers on the person with the highest status in Zhouzhou region. If this woman was angry, Li Hai and Beishao Liang, Qin, Li Hai flashed out of the house and saw the scene in front of him. His heart suddenly sank, and the scene of the ancestor vomiting blood and fainting last night kept appearing in his mind. However, he still resisted the pressure and walked to Emochin's side, tightly grasped Emochin's cold hand, and bowed his head. "Senior, please forgive me. Emochin didn't mean it." At this time, Bei Xiaoliang and Qi Chen also followed up. Seeing this scene, they were surprisingly not nervous. Su Li glanced at the two, and then her eyes returned to the master, who was so flustered that she lost her sense of propriety. She was silent for a while, and her indifferent and somewhat inhuman face suddenly became gentle. She waved her hand to disperse the water stains on her body and smiled. "Don't be nervous, come in and talk." Both Emochin and Li Hai were shocked, and then they couldn't help but feel flattered. Bei Xiaoliang and Qi Chen thought it was normal, but now that they knew Su Li's identity, they did not dare to take the initiative to speak. Thank you, master." Emochin reluctantly responded and followed into the house, but she was nervous. Although the face of the Lord of Jiuzhou region in front of her was very gentle, which was completely different from the cold and ruthless person last night, she still couldn't stop her palms from sweating. "Sit down anywhere. Don't be too restrained. I'm here to solve your doubts today." Su Li waved her hand, and a special light flashed in the depths of her plain eyes. After all, the fact was not like in the Chuangxing path. In the cold despair of the previous life, the master lit a candle of hope for her. Although the candle was still extinguished in the end, it became the last warmth in her heart in this life, and did not let her completely fall into the cold. "Unfortunately, it's not the time for a showdown." Su Li's eyes dimmed. Bizhui saw the situation of the master. She wanted to let the master get out of guilt, but the details of the fate ancestor were related to deduction. The more she exposed, the more likely it was to repeat the same mistake. A little impatience will spoil the great plan. Su Li, at this time, you have to be calmer. Even if the Jiuzhou region you conquered is really pulled out, no one will want to be an enemy of a character with the combat power comparable to a junior emperor. But if you show any of the identities of the Daughter of Luck, and the body of Evil Ghost, the entire Qingshui circle will come to kill you. Don't use the name Su Li for a long time. Black Lotus transmitted the sound seriously, which was rare. Su Li took a breath slightly and looked at the people sitting in the room in turn. Her eyes regained calmness. "I believe you have a lot of doubts, especially the two little guys Bei Xiaoliang and Qi Chen." As soon as Su Li said this, Emochin and Li Hai were stunned and turned their eyes. Bei Xiaoliang scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Senior sister apprentice, you have changed so much that my junior fellow apprentice and I dare not recognize you." "Senior sister apprentice?" Emochin was shocked. She turned her head and stared at Su Li's strange face. Her lips trembled. "You are Li?" Li Hai frowned, trying to find a trace of familiarity from Su Li's face, but he failed. Su Li pursed her lips slightly and said indifferently, "Although my surname is also Su, unfortunately, I am not. Elder Emochin, I respect you as the master of that person, so as long as you have a good relationship with her, I will give preferential treatment." As she said, she turned her head and looked at Bei Xiaoliang. She smiled jokingly. "In the secret realm of shattered spirits, I didn't want to reveal my identity, so I casually made up a senior sister apprentice. Now if you call me that, the misunderstanding will be big." Bei Xiaoliang scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I am being rude." "You are not?" The light in Emochin's eyes dissipated and she was full of loss. She should have given up long ago, but why did she always have hope? "Although I am not." Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly. "I have many former subordinates of that person. Needless to say, Hua Yan, others such as Yan Zai and Ling Qinglan are all her former subordinates in the reincarnation mirror, so you can trust me." "Yan Zai. Those are all former talents of holy sex." Li Hai seemed to know more. He frowned and thought for a moment. He raised his head and asked cautiously, "So, why do you take advantage of holy girl Su's power and painstakingly plan to unify the Jojo region?" Deputy Lord Li deserves to be the future lord of Yushu sect. Su Li smiled sweetly and her eyes flickered. "How about we make a deal?" She raised her eyebrows, and a dangerous light flashed in her eyes. "You should understand that anyone who has a relationship with that person will be on the opposite side of all holy sections. And you have a closer relationship with that person. If you are driven out of the Jojo region, your fate. I don't need to say more. If I want to continue to develop, I need more help." Lehigh frowned more and more tightly. He naturally knew that what the woman in front of him said was true. Because of this, he wanted to know whether it was worth staying in NI sect. "What do you want to say?" Su Li chuckled, and her tone became serious. "How about all of you come to help me? Especially you, Lehigh, you are a rare talent. If you come to be the deputy lord of NI sect, it will be convenient to protect the people you want to protect, right? Slowly you will find that we are the same kind of people." Chapter 539. Lehigh finally agreed to Su Li's deal. From the moment the conversation ended, he took over the mess of Yushu sect. In his view, the deal that Su Jojo said was simply a disguised threat, and he had no room to refuse. Not to mention the difficulty of leaving Jojo region. Just the moment he refused, Mo Chin and others would fall into an extremely dangerous situation with him. Whether they lived or died depended on Su Jojo. Even if Su Li really came back to life and stood in front of them and said this sentence, he had to consider whether Su Li would choose to destroy because of the truth. What's more, the woman in front of him was not Su Li at all, but a stranger in the name of Su Li. It was entirely possible that she would be angry and kill him secretly. What if he chooses to refuse? In the quiet room of books, Hua Yen asked with a smile. Su Li's eyes flickered and she said softly, "If he really refuses, I won't do anything to them. At most, I will put them under house arrest and not allow them to leave. Otherwise, if Master falls into the hands of the enemy, I will be restrained." Speaking of this, she raised her eyebrows and smiled again. "I have seen through Bijue's eyes what kind of person Lehigh is. He will not take risks for Master. Similarly, for the safety of Master, he will do his best to do things for NI sect. The safer NI sect is, the more stable they will be, right?" Hua Yen said helplessly, "You are still the same as before. You like to calculate." "No, Yen, you are wrong," Su Li retorted with a smile. She looked down at her white palm clenched into a fist and murmured, "If I have enough strength, why do I have to think so much?" Hua Yen was stunned and immediately smiled. "You are right. Well, you are the lord of NI sect, who has unified the Jojo region. You come to me specially. You are not here to gossip, are you?" Su Li teased, and Hua Yen suddenly rolled her eyes. "Li, you have learned to make up your best friend? You are the real master of NI sect. Don't you feel ashamed to say so?" As she said, she threw out a jade slip. "Here is the list of all the spies of holy sections. You can decide how to deal with them. After yesterday's war, NI sect has moved and integrated into Yushu sect, and its reputation is not prominent in the world. Except for Zihan sect, other sects have also found candidate. What to do next depends on your decision." Su Li stretched out her hand, and the jade slip fell into her hand. After scanning it with her divine awareness, she rested her chin on one hand and showed a thoughtful expression. Hua Yen didn't disturb him. She sat at the side and waited quietly. The room became quiet. After she drank the third cup of tea, she suddenly raised her head, and her eyes were slightly fierce. Hua Yen immediately took out a blank jade slip from her interspatial ring and began to record. "I will solve the matter of Zihan sect. It is not the time for us to be exposed. All the spies of holy sects must be firmly controlled. Second, there must be some people in Jojo region who have escaped the net. They have already sent the news to Holy Sex, but only a word or two. Holy Sex will at most send someone to probe. Let Yen Zai keep an eye on the teleporter. No suspicious person can be let go. Thirdly, let all sects hold the grand competition for cultivation, and the selected people would come to Yushu sect to fight as before. The top 20 could go to Xingxian Mountain to participate in the Tianjiao contest. Fourthly, use the intelligence route in your hand to find out where the big tactical matrix blocking Chimo Circle is. Hua Yen frowned when she heard the jade slip in her hand. Chimo Circle? Is it the chaos zone that turned Dafu region into a dead place? Yes. Su Li's eyes were deep. Don't you find that there are very few matrix masters in the entire Jojo region? Reminded by Su Li, Hua Yen was suddenly shocked and suddenly understood. Yes. Su Guohong, the strong matrix master of Su family, has been missing for thousands of years. In Junlo group, I found only small fries and crab generals. There are hardly any matrix masters above high grade. Even Yushu sect, which is strong in matrix, can't see a few matrix masters, so we took the opportunity to break in. Otherwise, the holy tactical matrix that protects Yushu sect can't be broken no matter how much time we have. Is it? Under Hua Yan's surprised gaze, Su Li nodded. I think it over and over again, and I always feel that it has something to do with Chimo Circle. I once heard the news that the war in Chimo Circle should have started 4 years ago, but there was no movement at all. It's so strange. Hua Yen looked slightly serious. I see. I'll arrange an informant to inquire about it. Su Li nodded, but Hua Yen seemed to suddenly think of something. She squinted and smiled. Li, you are more than qualified to participate in the Tianjiao contest. Are you interested in taking a place? Me? Su Li was slightly stunned. She had been making arrangements behind the scenes these years, but she forgot her body. She was a young girl in the prime of her youth. The dignified lord of Jojo region can also participate in the Tianjiao contest. Hua Yen covered her hot face, and her eyes were full of yearning. If we succeed and make everything public to the world, what kind of legend will this be passed down by future generations? Su Li laughed, but she really thought about the feasibility of this matter. According to Xianen, Xingxian Mountain was suppressed by the Tianjiao list, and the mysteries of heaven were obscured. She didn't worry about being found out by others. The only thing she needed to pay attention to was to control her power well and not expose too much to provoke the nerves of natural law. This matter might be difficult before the breakthrough of Sueyu tactic, but now the gray membrane in her body was thickened again. Even if she used the power comparable to Huashan realm, the natural law had no reaction. Thinking of this, Su Li thought of another thing, and couldn't help but have a headache. The external incarnation in her hand was almost exhausted, and she couldn't attract the thunder for punishment. Su Bai would not only starve, but also affect his continued growth. It couldn't be delayed. Yen, I once asked you to investigate the big region with a lot of ghosts. Did you find anything? When Su Li mentioned this, Hua Yen suddenly smiled. Speaking of this, I found something interesting. Su Li was slightly stunned, and Hua Yen continued, Do you still remember the Linli building? Su Li's expression changed slightly, and she said softly, Of course. By bribing a lord of Tianyake Attic, I found out that the base camp of the Linli building is hidden in the Inyang region with a lot of ghosts. The holy sects sent many groups of seniors to explore it, but because of the special nature of the Inyang region, they all returned without success. Special? Su Li raised her eyebrows. How special? I heard that the Inyang region, as its name suggests, is half of the extreme Yin level, and the other half of the extreme Yang level. The two are obviously completely contradictory but strangely balanced. In the crack between the two extreme areas, it is the area where the 5 elements are completely chaotic. No matter what tracking method is used, it will be completely ineffective. Many desperados who are chased by the holy sects are there. Speaking of this, Hua Yan's tone was firm. I heard that the core of the Leanly building is hidden in the crack, and the status of the force there is quite objective. It is one of the only 3 forces that control a stable space. What are the other 2 forces? Su Li narrowed her eyes, but Hua Yan shook her head. That's all I got. You may know other information when you go to the Yinyang region. There are many ghosts in the extreme Yin area. Although ordinary practitioners can't survive there, it should be okay for you to stay there for a short time with your strength. Su Li nodded. There is still half a year before the Tianjiao battle in the Xingxian mountain begins. I still have enough time. If I don't come back by then, I will meet you in the Xingxian mountain. Hua Yan stared at her with her almond-shaped eyes. The Jiuzhou region has not been stabilized yet. Are you going to leave now? Of course not. Su Li smiled apologetically. The holy sects won't be too slow. After dealing with the people of the holy sects, I will set off immediately. For the future of the Ni sect, I have to continue to enhance my strength, right? Hua Yan rolled her eyes and said angrily, "This is really a qualified reason to be a hands-off boss." Su Li chuckled. "I believe that you can handle the rest with your ability. I will sell the Jiuzhou region later." Hua Yan said fiercely, and couldn't help laughing again. "That's a deal. Our lord of the Jiuzhou region, remember to get a good ranking on the list of Tianjiao top 10,000 this time." Su Li smiled indifferently and did not answer. Hua Yan immediately understood and floated away. Since her friend decided to take action, the little guys of this generation would be out of luck. After a few days, the teleportation matrix of the cultivation city under the control of Yushu sect finally lit up one after another, and figures with extraordinary temperament appeared one after another. On this day, a red light flashed through the teleportation matrix, and 2 figures appeared. Whoosh! There was a faint voice of conversation in the sound of the teleportation matrix closing. "Senior fellow apprentice, you are really worrying too much. I think the spy must have been outside for a long time and was unwilling to give up, so he spread such a rumor. Haven't the sect master and elders already confirmed with the other sects that there's no such thing as a sect war? It's a matter of great importance. Whether it's a lie or not, we have to come and see." The older one stepped out of the teleportation matrix and looked at the peaceful and backward streets of the city, and his thoughts were relaxed. It seemed to be a rumor. If there was a war, such a peaceful atmosphere would have been destroyed long ago. To be cautious, let's go to Yushu sect again. Okay, senior fellow apprentice. After the 2 finished talking, they walked into an inn together and closed the door. 3 days later, the 2 walked out of the inn talking and laughing. Under the strange eyes of pedestrians, they held their fists to a mass of air and walked into the teleportation matrix politely. After the 2 completely disappeared, Su Li walked out of the darkness with the little black cat in her arms, and her eyes were indifferent. Yanzai beside her couldn't help but sigh. "Master, the power of He is really surprising. In this way we can directly save a lot of effort. The Jiuzhou region can be peaceful until the Battle of Tianjiao. At that time, any holy sects will not be afraid of them." Su Li smiled and said, "I can't do it alone. You should also practice hard." "Of course." Su Li responded and glanced at the sky. "It seems that this is the last wave of spies. Among the 81 holy sects in Qingshui Circle, 60 waves of spies have come. They really care about the Jiuzhou region." Yanzai nodded solemnly. "The number is more than the number of spies. It seems that we still have a party of spies that we haven't caught. It is that person who leaked the information. I will leave tomorrow. I don't need to say more about the next thing." Su Li turned around and walked away slowly. Before leaving, she suddenly remembered that there was one more thing to do. Chapter 540. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. In the underground ice dungeon. Rumble, the stone door was opened and the moist wind blew from the entrance. It instantly formed beautiful ice flowers and fell at Su Li's feet. As the stone door was closed again, Su Li's eyes darkened a little. She stepped out and flashed into the depths like a phantom. After a while, she stopped in front of a small iceberg. At the bottom of the iceberg, a dense chain of forbidden spirits penetrated and entangled the pale woman sitting on the ice. This woman was Fong Ling. In just a few days, Fong Ling's ruddy face had been frozen pale, and her lips were purple. However, her expression seemed very dead. It seemed that this suffering could not touch her at all. Fong Ling seemed to sense the change of light. Then she slowly raised her head and opened her eyes. After seeing the person clearly, her stiff face finally had a slight change, and her frozen lips opened and closed with difficulty. "It's you, it's me." Su Li smiled lightly and sat down directly on the cold ground in front of Fong Ling. "Do you know me?" Fong Ling smiled faintly. Su Jiuzhou, the Grand Elder of an ice sect who only took 2 days to unify the Jiuzhou region. Now, everyone in the 25 sects knows you. I turned out to be so famous. Su Li tilted her head and seemed to be a little distressed. Seeing this, Fong Ling's smile became deeper. It was not her, but so what? She saw many familiar faces, including Yan Zai, Ling Qinglan, and many people who still missed her. Since there was someone who could gather these people together to avenge her, then she wouldn't have any regrets. Thinking of this, she hesitated for a moment and took the initiative to ask, "What are you doing here?" Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. "You don't seem to be afraid of me at all?" "Afraid? Why should I be afraid?" Fong Ling stared at Su Li. "I should have ended all this long ago, but I couldn't help it. Since such a person like you appeared, I can die without regret." Su Li looked at Fong Ling silently. She couldn't distinguish or believe it anymore. What happened before was still vivid in her mind. If it weren't for Mei Ruhan, her bracelet wouldn't have been broken. As for the blessing in disguise, it naturally couldn't be attributed to Mei Ruhan. For example, Yan Zai and Ling Qinglan were kept in the dark and sent to the reincarnation mirror. After they came out, their temperaments changed greatly. They were completely tied up by the emotional shackles of the mirror world and gave up everything to wander outside. She could trust them. As for Fong Ling, how could she believe that she would continue to be a holy sect in Yushu sect and enjoy the best cultivation resources after coming out? Fong Ling naturally couldn't sense Su Li's hesitation. Seeing that the woman in front of her didn't speak for a long time, she didn't care and continued, "Although you have now gained a firm foothold, there are 2 things I want to remind you. The first thing is the spy of the holy sections. I have heard from the Grand Elder of Yushu sect that there are more than 1 spy of the holy sects in Jiuzhou region. If your existence is known by the holy sects, there will be a hard fight. It's not your turn to worry about this." Su Li smiled coldly, however. "You are the holy girl of Yushu sect. Logically speaking, you should regard me as an enemy. I didn't expect that you would actually think for your enemy." "Enemy?" Fong Ling took a deep look at Su Li and turned her head away. Her voice was very soft. "We are not enemies." Su Li curled her lips with a touch of sarcasm. "You said there are 2 things. Then, what is the second thing?" Fong Ling's eyes dimmed slightly. After a long silence, she finally said, "The second thing is the Grand Elder of Yushu sect. Although he has been missing for a long time, I heard from my master that the Grand Elder is still alive. He is comparable to the existence of Junior Emperor in the ancient cultivation period. You have to be careful." "Your master?" Su Li's eyes flashed. "Your master? Who is he? Ding Yan? Or Yao Shuangya?" "None of them. They are just in Huashan realm. How can they compare with my master?" Fong Ling shook her head, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. "My master, although she is heinous and has done so many wrong things, she treats me really well." Su Li looked at Fong Ling calmly. So, is this the reason why you continue to stay in Yushu's sect? I remember that you have a senior sister apprentice who is also in the ice prison, but I didn't see her this time. Where is she? Su Li suddenly said. Fong Ling's delicate body trembled slightly, and the face with deep eye sockets appeared in her mind. However, with a smile on her face, she said softly, "Since you have gathered so many of her subordinates, I have long guessed that you will ask this. But the senior sister apprentice is not like me. Her consciousness in the mirror world is split from her body, and the two are in conflict with each other. Since she came out, she has become a complete lunatic." Su Li listened silently. It turned out that Mei Ruhan was really crazy. She remembered the scene when she met her a few years ago. The skeleton-like figure could still be clearly recalled. However, I later found that the consciousness of senior sister apprentice Mei in the mirror world gradually swallowed the original consciousness. In most cases, she had returned to normal, but she could not forgive herself, so she pretended to be crazy and tortured herself. Until I heard that the master wanted to strip her soul and use it as the core of the tactical matrix. Su Li's pupils shrank and her voice was imperceptibly bitter. Mei Ruhan is dead? Was that the last time she saw her? Fong Ling's voice became more and more low and hoarse. She shook her head and said, "Senior sister apprentice has killed the consciousness of holy girl Su who killed Sister Li. She did nothing wrong and shouldn't be killed by the master. So, Luo Yichen and I made a plan to send the senior sister apprentice out of Jiuzhou region." I see. The lines on Su Li's face were much gentler. On the one hand, you can't forget the master, and on the other hand, you are against the master's will. You are a surprisingly contradictory person. Fong Ling bit her lips, and pain flashed through her eyes. But she smiled and said, "Thank you for the compliment, Region Lord." Su Li smiled slightly. "Since you have revealed so much, I will change a better environment for you. At least, you will not end up freezing to death like your lord and others." Hearing Su Li's words, Fong Ling was disappointed. "If I had known it, I would not have said so much to you." Su Li chuckled and turned to leave. But she heard Fong Ling speak again behind her. This time, the voice was extremely heavy. "Be careful of my master." "What about her?" Su Li turned her head, only to see Fong Ling lowered her head, and her face could not be seen clearly. Fong Ling continued to say, "She is a person who is more difficult to deal with than the Grand Elder of Yushu sect. Even joining Yushu sect is also calculated. Be careful." Su Li raised her eyebrows. "What's your master's name?" What answered her was silence. The air stagnated for a moment, and Su Li turned and disappeared at the end of the ice road. She didn't ask because it was meaningless. Since Yushu sect was easily won by her, it was enough to prove that Fong Ling's master was not in the sect. Rumble, the sound of the stone door closing came from far away. After the light dimmed, Fong Ling suddenly clutched her chest, and the blood-red mark between her eyebrows flickered constantly. The mark flickered faster and faster, and finally collapsed suddenly. Fong Ling only felt blood rushing up her throat, and she opened her mouth to spit out a dark red. Phew! Fong Ling let out a long breath and leaned against the cold stone wall, gasping for air. She only vaguely reminded her, but it triggered the inhibition set in her mind by her master. "Master, in the world of ice and snow," a long sigh lingered. "Hua Yen, I'm leaving." Su Li stood in front of the door and looked back at the extremely simple quiet room. "I'll stay in the sect. This time, it has launched dozens of dreams in a row, and it really needs a rest." The little black cat lying in the cat's nest seemed to hear its master's concern, and it meowed softly. Hua Yin nodded, and her voice was clear and firm. "Don't worry. I'm here." Su Li smiled and no longer said anything. She turned into a streamer and disappeared into the sky. In the desolate desert, the scorching sun was hanging high. Two figures could be seen from afar, one in front and the other in the back, moving forward in the wind and smoke. Suddenly, a gust of wind came and rolled up the sand. Su Buwang didn't check it for a moment, and his mouth was immediately stuffed with sand. Ba ba ba. Su Buwang spat, straightened up, touched his dry throat, and said helplessly, "Uncle Fong, haven't we arrived yet?" Fong Yuan tightened the cloth on his face, and looked at the undulating and boundless desert in the distance. "Soon. If the map is correct, we will meet the crack in 2 days." 2 days. Su Buwang pulled a long face, raised his head, and fell on the soft sand powerlessly. He squinted at the fiery red Jinwu in the sky. "We have been walking for a whole month. This yin and yang region is so special. It is not only vast, but also the protective spiritual shield can't block the sand." Fong Yuan sat aside and grabbed a handful of extremely hot sand. "If you don't neglect your practice and step into the late stage of Yuanying realm, these sand will be able to block you." "Uncle Fong, are you still a human?" Su Buwang sat up with grief and indignation, pointed at Fong Yuan's nose and complained. "In just 10 years, I suddenly stepped from the early stage of Jindan realm to the middle stage of Yuanying realm. You almost wasted my practice. Do you think it's easy for me? Even so, you still think I am slow?" Fong Yuan's face was slightly serious. "Today is different from the past. No one cared about you before. Now that you are with me, your cultivation can't be lagged. Do you want to lose face in front of your mother?" Su Buang scratched his head, and his eyes were a little confused. "My mother, so many years have passed. Is my mother still alive?" "She must be alive." Fong Yuan's cold eyes were slightly dim, but his voice was low and firm. "Yes." Su Buwang nodded. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "Uncle Fong, how do you know that my mother may be in the yin and yang region? I saw that your face changed when you heard the words leanly building. Does it have anything to do with my mother?" He had wanted to ask more specifically. After traveling with Fong Yuan for these years, he probably guessed that Uncle Fong had something to do with his mother. But every time he asked about his mother's origin, he couldn't get an answer. What kind of person was his mother on Earth? Was she noble or humble? Since she had a relationship with such a mysterious and powerful uncle, she couldn't be the maid mentioned by the Lord Evil Emperor. So, was she beautiful or ugly? Was she fat or thin? Was his personality gentle or forceful? Su Buwang often thought so, and even often dreamed of a woman, but he couldn't see her face clearly. When Fong Yuan heard the words leanly building, his eyelids twitched and he turned his head away. How should he answer? Should he say that the woman had died for more than 1,000 years, and the enemy was the holy sex in the world? The murderer who killed your mother was not only your father, but also me. This answer was too heavy. What was the benefit of letting Su Buwang bear it? Since Ling Li was not cruel enough to tell him the truth, then how could he bear it? Uncle Fong, look. What is that? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.